Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Town of Waukesha joint public hearing with the Town Board and the Plan Commission, and meeting of the Town of Waukesha Plan Commission, followed by the Town Board. I'd like to call the meeting to order and begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. And Madam Clerk, could you call the roll?
Chairman Merrick.
Present.
Supervisor Fisher.
Here.
Supervisor Durr.
Here.
Supervisor Wolf.
Here.
Supervisor Radke is absent. Commissioner Miller.
Here.
Commissioner Flanagan.
Here.
Commissioner White.
Here.
Commissioner Stigler.
Here.
And Commissioner Ramirez is absent.
Thank you. And Madam Clerk, have we met the requirements of the open meetings law?
Yes, we have.
And we can begin then with public hearing number one. We got a lot of folks in the audience tonight, so we'd ask that you keep your comments to 3 minutes so that everybody has an opportunity to be heard, and that nobody would speak twice until everybody that wants to speak would have an opportunity to be heard. And regarding the public hearings, if your comments are directed towards that particular hearing, please speak at that time. If not, then when they are appropriate for that specific agenda item. Hearing number one, notice is hereby given that a joint public hearing involving the Town of Waukesha Plan Commission and the Waukesha Town Board will be held on Thursday, August 10, 2017, beginning at 6 p.m. at the Waukesha Town Hall, located at West 250 South 3567 Center Road, Waukesha, Wisconsin, to hear proposed conditional use amendment request for Rodney Kunze. Location is South 52, West 24084 Glendale Road, Waukesha, Wisconsin. Tax keys are WAKT 1404994, specifically to construct an accessory building. And we can begin with Planner Ivarchuk.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Before you tonight is Mr. Kunze. He resides at South 52 West 24084 Glendale Road. He and his wife live in the farmhouse with the agricultural buildings. The reason he's before you tonight is two parts, and it's two separate items on the agenda, 7A and 7B. What he does is that his current property where he resides, there's a conditional use on the property. It's zoned B2. The reason that the property is zoned B2 is that the principal use on the property is the commercial kennel. And then the house that they reside on is the accessory use to the commercial kennel. So what we have to do is we have to update the conditional use for the subject property. And updating the conditional use, we've added a condition in there that says that he has the right to ask for modifications or reconstruction of an accessory building on the property. And then the second item on the agenda, if the Plan Commission and Board approve this, is his accessory structure application to reconstruct a accessory building that was lost due to rain and wind that had happened in April of this year. So as I'd mentioned, it's zone B2. On the property is a commercial kennel, single family residence, and a detached garage, along with several agricultural buildings and pastures that's on the farm. Again, the commercial kennel is the primary use on the property. The single family residence and detached accessory garage are secondary or an accessory to that. The agricultural buildings and the pastures for the farm animals, those have been there in the entirety of the parcel. So they're legal, non-conforming. They're actually not part of the conditional use. Basically, the commercial kennel operates in the 24 by 32 remodeled agricultural barn. Basically, the activities that happen in that is the boarding of the dogs and cats on the first floor, the grooming and doggy daycare on the first floor, reception and office areas on the first floor, and bathrooms. On the second floor is the dog training area, meeting room for staff, and then there's also fenced outdoor runs and agility course for the dogs. Commercial kennel has 4 full-time employees and 1 to 2 part-time employees. Hours of operation are Monday through Sunday, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. Subject property provides approximately 10 parking stalls for staff and for clientele, as well as directly across the street where Mr. Kunze's veterinary clinic is. There's overflow parking for the use there as well. As far as the planner comments, as I had mentioned, the reason they're before you tonight is that their detached accessory structure that they was damaged due to storms in April of this year. Mr. Kunze has already removed the garage and the rubble. The only thing that's there is basically the foundation. What they're looking to do is rebuild the garage, but basically build it to a size and standards for more modern vehicles. In the older garage, his truck, while it fit in it, they couldn't close the part of the truck was past the garage door. So in the new garage that they're building, they're actually going to build it size so that both vehicles fit in there. So the public hearing is just on the conditional use, step 1. We've reflected all of the standard conditions that were part of the existing conditional use. The only thing that we added was condition number 3. Conditional use approval shall allow the petitioner to reconstruct and enlarge the detached garage without the need for a public hearing or an amendment to this conditional use permit. The petitioner shall follow the necessary procedures and comply with the applicable code requirements for approval of the accessory building. So with that, I will turn it back over to the Plan Commission for any questions from staff.
Thank you. And Mr. Kunze, I see you're in the audience tonight. Would you, anything to present to the board or Plan Commission? And please come on up to the mic.
I'm Rod Kunze, and I reside in the house there, and I'm proposing to build the new garage slightly larger and a little bit closer to my house and away from the kennel building. It is from my personal use and my vehicles. The previous garage was only 17 foot deep and my farm trucks hung out, so we never closed the doors. And this one would be 24 foot deep, but it would actually be farther away from the driveway and closer to the house. So making snow removal easier and making it more convenient for ourselves to use as a garage and away from the business traffic.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Kunze or Planner Rybarczyk?
Just got one question. I think maybe this comes about in the second part to it, but the number 3 there under the conditional use permit that you went through, Planner Rybarczyk basically says allows it to be enlarged. Is it necessary or appropriate at all to have any kind of parameter on that size of that or anything, or are you comfortable with that simply being open-ended and will be addressed when we get to the next item?
I think that's a policy decision. I thought from my standpoint that in that second sentence, because I said it had to follow the necessary procedures and comply with the applicable code requirements for an accessory structure, that possibly that would cover us, that it has to go through the accessory building review process that talks about size and location. So that's why I didn't specify a size. But again, it's a policy decision that if on condition 3 we wanted to add a maximum size, we could.
Thank you. Does that answer your question, Supervisor Fisher? Yeah. Thank you. Any other questions? We can open it up to comments from the public if there are any. Going once, Going twice. Then we can close public hearing number 1 and move on to number 2. Notice is hereby given that a joint public hearing involving the Town of Waukesha Plan Commission and the Waukesha Town Board will be held on Thursday, August 10, 2017, beginning at 6 p.m. at the Waukesha Town Hall, located at West 250 South 3567 Center Road, Waukesha, Wisconsin, to hear proposed zoning code Title 13 and zoning map and land use code Title 12 changes. All interested parties will be heard. Take it away, Planner Ray Barczyk.
On this one, I'll tag team with Attorney Macy. Attorney Macy did the review of Title 12, which is our land division ordinance. I had done the review of Title 13, which is our zoning ordinance. Along with the track change code of Title 13, I did prepare a letter dated July 31st to both the Plan Commission and the Board. And what this does is kind of summarizes all of the changes that we did to Title 13 respectively. Keep in mind that we didn't do a complete codification or a complete rewrite of Title 13. We only focused on certain areas that the Plan Commission and Board and staff felt needed to be addressed based on prior developments. What had kind of spearheaded these amendments is that the Town of Waukesha is currently working with Muni Code to get all of their ordinances put into an electronic form for the general public to then be able to utilize on the website. As part of their initial review, they had provided some comments to us on not only Title 12 and Title 13, but all of the titles of the code. With regard to Title 13, areas that we looked at were first statutory references. There was a lot of, since the last time the town adopted revisions to Title 13, which is zoning, there's been a lot of state statute updates, amendments. There's been a lot of case law that has come into play. So what we did is we took all that into consideration and made recommendations to the code where we thought were applicable. For example, signage. We went through and we updated signage based on recent state statute and case law that under First Amendment rights, you can no longer regulate sign for its content. We can only regulate signs for size and location, but we can't actually regulate against what can be put on the sign. There was also state statute amendments for legal non-conforming uses, as well as adult-oriented establishments. So we had gone through, worked with Attorney Macy and his firm, and made the necessary changes for that. We also updated the provisions in our ordinance to accommodate persons with disabilities. We did have a recent request where someone needed to add a porch onto the front of their house for ADA accessibility. So that led to some changes that we had made in our ordinance to allow other provisions like that to happen. We also looked at off-street parking for commercial vehicles, recreational vehicles and recreational trailers, how those can be many you potentially have on your property, what size they could potentially have depending on the size of your property, et cetera. We made some modifications to height, area, and setback regulations to be consistent with Waukesha County. Waukesha County at the end of last year went through and they updated their basic zoning ordinance, and they also updated their shoreline and floodland protection ordinance to modify heights based on new industry standards that they've been seeing for housing construction. They also made some modifications to setbacks as a result of trying to decrease impervious surface and stormwater management facilities that a lot of developments need to have, as well as area regulations. We did work with Waukesha County to update our zoning map. Our zoning map was starting to get outdated with regard to identifications of environmental corridors, both primary, secondary, isolated natural resources. It was outdated with some of the recent FEMA and DNR floodplain mapping and wetland mapping. So what we did is we went to identifying those areas as overlay districts versus base zoning districts. So what that means is that you now have a base zoning district of residential, commercial, agricultural, and then on top of it, you have overlay districts that have additional parameters for environmental corridors, wetlands, and floodplains. What that allows us to do is that if someone objects to how the overlay districts are mapped, they can hire sewer pack or a private consultant to have those areas delineated. If the delineations show that those areas are smaller in size, then we take the delineation for as kind of fact. And those overlay districts then either increase or decrease in size based on the delineation. So it allows for greater flexibility and building potential based on actual in-field investigations or determinations of those areas. A lot of times how zoning maps worked to date is that it was just based on historical aerial photography, and they just looked at kind of colorations and aerials and assumed that those were the wetlands. But when you actually go out and field delineate them, you find out that they could be much smaller, allowing for more development potential. We also did add a couple conditional uses. One was for off-street parking. We have had some requests where people are expanding or needing additional parking that can't necessarily be found on their site, but maybe an adjoining property, so that that parking serves whether it's a restaurant or an industrial building, et cetera. We did create a conditional use for event venue. We spent a lot of time end of last year and this year creating the requirements for an event venue. And it was more of a kind of started in a conditional use process. We did send a draft of our Title 13 off to Waukesha County staff. They did review it and they provided us with some comments. They were very minor in nature. We have addressed those comments. One is multifamily dwelling unit sizes. They wanted us to take into consideration decreasing those based on the sewer pack regional housing plan that was done. Staff has decreased those. It doesn't necessarily mean that all multifamily that's going to start building in the town of Waukesha is going to be these little tiny units. It just allows for the ability. Market trends through this study is showing that even the high-end multifamily developers, people who are renting or purchasing these are looking for smaller units but higher quality materials. So you're getting the high-end finishes of, countertops, plumbing fixtures, cabinetry, etc. And in order to keep the price point the same, the units are getting smaller. So it's a little bit of a trade-off. But all of the surround within Waukesha County, including the cities as well, have all gone to this standard. So it's something that Waukesha County adopted, something that also your surrounding neighbors have adopted as part of their codes as well. So it was one thing that the county had asked us to take into consideration. So that's a general overview. We started this process back in May. We've had numerous public meetings that were open to the general public to come and ask any questions of the changes we've done. I did ask Clerk Nicholas this morning if we've had any people call in with any comments or any suggestions in that, and the answer was no. So it's been pretty silent from the general public on these changes. So with that, that's my overview for Title 13. I'll turn it over to Attorney Macy to talk about Title 12.
Thank you, Mr. Barczyk. My changes that I was asked to do for Chapter 12 are much less. They're almost all changes by changes in the state law. Since the downturn in the economy in 2008, the state has worked with the developers to grant additional times for the filing of final plats, as an example, from 1 year to 3 years, and those changes need to be made. So Very little of the changes to Chapter 12, which is Land Division and Development Ordinance, commonly known as the Subdivision Control Ordinance, are substantive in nature. They're just, to bring it up to the current state law. The internal code references were updated and corrected. The references to the right departments in the state were updated. Statutory references, again, were updated as necessary. There were some changes added. This is all from my memo. You should all have it. I hate to read to people. You've all read it, but for the public, there were some changes made about procedures for lot line adjustments. Every community should have that in their land development ordinance if you have two adjoining lots. I believe it was the Attorney General indicated that you can review lot line adjustments, although they don't have to do a certified survey map, you still can review them. And in some instances, the county has actually asked for that kind of review so that we're sure that the lot line adjustments are legal. There were changes in the state law regarding financial guarantees for developments. And so certain changes had to be made in that regard in order to comply with the new state law. And again, everything else is just references. You had asked us through our staff meetings and direction to remove the solar access references. At some point in time, numerous changes were made to the code regarding solar access, and those were removed. Impact fee language was brought up to being compliant with the current laws, and just technical drafting. Again, everything else the planner indicated to you, the project was done as a result of the codification of the entire code book. This is one small piece of it. It was a good opportunity to bring the code up to current laws, but we did not bring to you a full-scale rewrite of Chapter 12 or ask you if you wanted to change your procedures in any way. We just dealt with what were the outstanding current changes in the law for the most part. Unless there's any questions, that's all I have to report.
Anybody have any questions for the planner or Attorney Macy? Supervisor Fisher?
Yeah, I have two questions, I think probably for Planner Rybarczyk. First one would be, do you have a sense or can you give me an estimate of what the average total floor area of a single family residence in the town of Waukesha at this time would be in terms of square feet?
I don't. I would be making a guess.
Okay. Second question, somewhat related, do you have an estimate of the average width of a single family residence with an attached garage in the town of Waukesha at this time? Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Commissioner Stigler?
You talked about the overlay, like on conservation land and things, I saw on the zoning map, the Waukesha County shoreland jurisdiction. On some parcels, it's wider than in the past or never even existed. Who decided that?
It's based on Waukesha County's requirements, so based on their shoreline and floodland protection ordinance. It's 1,000 feet from lakes and from streams, and then 300 feet from 300. I think it's 300 feet from streams, and it's 1,000 feet from lakes and natural water bodies. So it's their ordinance, their authority.
Does that come under the right to delineate that? If it's proved that that's not accurate? Does the landowner have that right to do that?
Attorney Macy, do you recall objecting to shoreline zoning, the process that a property owner would go through if they feel that the distance is not accurate? I'm not familiar with that process.
Well, there's usually not. It's usually not an issue because the county has the maps and if there's a question as to the ordinary high water mark, it's the center of the stream or the river, so that's not an ordinary high water mark. And from the lake, I think it's the ordinary high water mark that they measure from. So usually that's not an issue, but you would just contact the county and say, I believe that your map is wrong, and they deal with it. It's right in the statute. I've never heard of a problem where it's mapped wrong, but if there is, you would contact the county and ask them to check their mapping.
Does that answer your question? Any other questions? We can open it up to public comments. Come on up to the mic. Good evening.
Good evening.
And your name and address for the clerk, please.
My name is Chad Vendetti. I live on Country Club Court in Waukesha. How are you all this evening?
Great, how are you?
Good. Mr. Chairman, clerks, town board, others. I have prepared statements since I'm held to 3 minutes, so. So I'm speaking here tonight.
Could you get your house address, please, also?
House number.
S35W27650.
Thank you.
Everyone here in this room, I think, understands that type of address, right? Most don't. I am speaking here tonight in regards to proposed home development at the Legends at Merrill Hills Golf Club.
But we should save that for public comments because this is specific to this public hearing right now.
So this is not the Legends?
It is not.
Okay,
We'll cut, that'll come up in a little bit.
thank you.
Thanks.
Well, it may not be a little bit. We better explain what.
It's not a public, the Legends is not having a public hearing. It's purely for conceptual review. And that'll come up at the Plan Commission after the.
No,
Fine.
it's coming up at the town board. There's no public comments.
Merrill
Hills is coming up. Let me explain what the chairman and I are arguing about here. Plan Commission does not have public comments on their agenda. That most Plan Commissions do not. There are opportunities for the residents to speak when there are public hearings on a specific item. And there is, if the proposal would go ahead and they apply for something that requires a public hearing, that's when the opportunity is for the citizens to speak on any one of the agenda items as if there's a public hearing. The public hearing on the zoning code and on the land division is not modifying anything that would have to do with that development. I mean, they're not this code change does not rezone those lands. It's not specific to my knowledge to any lands. Okay, so we apologize if there's any confusion. These public hearings were scheduled months ago, long before we knew the Merrill Hills was even going to be on the agenda. So just so you know, I'm not pulling your leg when I say these two public hearings, the one for the doctor and the general one, which is really coming from the town just to update their codes, do not deal with any of the proposals on the agenda. Okay, we have a long agenda tonight with numerous agenda items. And one of them, which we assume many of you are here for, is the conceptual development and review of the Legends at Merrill Hills. That's a presentation. There will be no discussion. There will be no public hearing on that matter tonight. There is no opportunity, in all frankness, for the public to speak. They're here to listen to the presentation like the Plan Commission is, and I assume the town board will be in the public because, you know, they could stay around and listen also. If there was confusion in that regard, we apologize. There probably in all likelihood will be a public hearing down the road. The chairman referenced that there is a public comment period on the town board agenda, which follows the Plan Commission meeting. And if you're of a mind to, you can stay and make comments on any relevant matter before the town board meeting. And that's what that's what he and I were discussing here. We didn't want to give you the impression that the Plan Commission will have on agenda item, I saw it 2 seconds ago, H, or what is it, I, they will have a conceptual development review, and for everybody here to hear what's being proposed. But the Plan Commission is taking no action. The town board's taking no action. I'm going to be giving them a warning later that they can't even respond because it will be subject to a public hearing and they have to make their decision based on the public hearing. So you're all welcome to stay and listen. We hope you'll stay and listen to the conceptual presentation. You're all welcome to stay till the town board meeting, which follows the Plan Commission meeting, and under public comments would be your opportunity to speak.
Thank you for the clarification. No, it's at the beginning of the town board meeting. So we'll finish the public, yes, we'll finish the public hearings, then the Plan Commission meeting, then the town board meeting starts. You're welcome. So back to public comments for public hearing number 2. Anybody? Good evening.
Thank you. My name is Faye Emerson. I reside at West 270 South 3565 Oak Knoll Drive. I know how difficult it is going through ordinances and codifying them and updating state statutes, and I commend the staff and the attorney for coming forward with changes to Chapter 12, which is your subdivision ordinance, and Title 13, or there are two titles, 13 for your zoning. I'm just curious about how the public can provide some recommendations of what else needs to be changed in your subdivision ordinance and your zoning code. And let me just give you some examples. The town has kind of brushed off stormwater management to the county. They do the permitting, they do the plan review. I believe that's way too late in the planning process for a new development. And it's kind of unfair to a developer. The town, when they're reviewing projects, should require preliminary stormwater review, site inspection or site evaluation for infiltration, so that the development that you are reviewing meets the state and county stormwater standards. This is done commonly in many communities, that a preliminary stormwater management plan is done early in the development stage, actual level. Also, I don't know, I think this would be in Title 13 on zoning. More needs to be paid attention to the isolated natural areas and wetlands. Certainly, isolated natural areas and wetlands should be delineated and identified early in whether a zoning permit is being issued, a building permit is being issued, or a subdivision is being considered. So what I'm asking you is how does the public, I mean, you had a public hearing tonight on some sections of Title 12 and 13. So how do we, as citizens, recommend that enhancements be made in the future so that, you know, these environmental and stormwater issues are addressed early in the planning stage and not at the end?
Sure.
Thank you.
I can address some of that. Stormwater management wasn't brushed off to the county. The county has control of it and has since stormwater management inception. The town, it's not in our jurisdiction to address that. We do, however, look at stormwater management early on in the process, and we do review the stormwater management plans along with the county. That being said, the county still has jurisdiction over it, but we do look at it. Regarding wetlands and delineation of wetlands and environmental corridors, that also is looked at early on and must be delineated by a developer if they were to develop a subdivision, a property. Those things do happen, and they are required by both us and the county. Already in our codes.
In answer to the question of how it comes about, when the staff hasn't proposed it, there are two general mechanisms. One is a resident can petition for a text amendment to a zoning code, and I think the land division, but right in both of these codes that are before the body tonight, it has a section called amendments, and it indicates who can petition to do so. So you could either, if you're a resident, I think it's limited to residents, we can look it up for you, but you can check it. You know of what I speak. And then that's one option, is that residents can file a petition for a text amendment. And often where people come in and say, we think your size of garage or heights of garage, you know, should be modified. And we go through this same process if they file a petition. And the other way that it's done is you write a letter to the board or come to public comments and you say, we think your code is outdated. You can contact a supervisor. You could contact a plan commissioner, because on their motion, it also occurs. But generally, I would say the most typical, if you don't have a development, when you have general comments like you've made and you feel that there should be text amendments, you generally would send a letter to the town board asking them to consider either the next time they amend their code or when they're of a mind to do so, what specific text amendment you would recommend, you would ask for. Does that answer your question?
Thank you. Any other public comments regarding public hearing number 2? Going once, going twice. Then we can close public hearing number 2 and move on to the Plan Commission. At this time, it'd be appropriate for board members not on the Plan Commission to join the audience. And we can move on to number 6, meeting minutes of 7/13/2017. Is there a motion to approve the meeting minutes? Supervisor Flanagan and, I'm sorry, Commissioner Flanagan and Commissioner Miller. Any comments? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Oh, and an abstention. I apologize. And on to 7, discussion and possible action on a conditional use for petitioner Rod Kunze. This is Kunze Pet Boarding at South 52 West 24084 Glendale Road. Tax key is WAKT 1404994. Planner Rybarczyk.
I don't have any additional comments. I think I covered it during the public hearing standpoint.
Thank you.
So for 7A, I think we're fine. 7B, I'll have additional comments.
Any questions for Planner Rybarczyk?
Mr.
Supervisor
Chairman,
Fisher?
I'll move to recommend approval to the town board with the inclusion of the conditions that the planner has laid out in the staff recommendations, and I so move.
Thank you. In a
I'll
second.
second that.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. On to accessory, B, accessory structure. The petitioner again is Rod Kunze at the Kunze Pet Boarding at South 52 West 24084 Glendale Road. Tax key is WAKT 1404994, and this is for a recommendation to the town board. Planner Rybarczyk.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So in addition, or part 2 of the approvals for Mr. Kunze tonight is the accessory structure. So basically what they're looking to do is they're proposing a detached garage that's 24 by 32, so 768 square feet. The height of the garage will be 12 foot 6 inches as measured from grade to peak. Petitioner has stated that the exterior color of the accessory building will have white vinyl siding and asphalt shingles to match the circa 1898 farmhouse. Accessory building will also include 2 white aluminum overhead garage doors and 1 entry door. Accessory building will be used for the storage of lawn care and snow removal personal vehicles that are used on the property. Per our accessory building ordinance, anytime a building is over 600 square feet or greater or exceeding the maximum height requirement, it requires both plan commission and board approval. When I reviewed the accessory structure per our ordinances, it is located in the side yard. It's not any closer to the road right of way than the principal residence that where it's at. As far as the building materials, the petitioner has stated that it is going to match the existing residence as close as possible. They are required a 50-foot setback and 20-foot offset for the B2 zoning district, and the petitioner is compliant with those requirements. And then the height restrictions for an accessory building in the B2 local business district is 15 feet, and they're proposing 12 feet 6 inches. So if the Plan Commission so chooses tonight, I did put together a recommendation to the town board for approval, and it's subject to the 8 standard conditions that we have. First condition is that the accessory building shall not exceed 768 square feet and 12 feet 6 inches in height. Second is that the accessory building shall be constructed according to the site plan, plans and specifications and documents that were presented to the Plan Commission tonight. Third is that the accessory building follows all of the requirements of the accessory building ordinance. Fourth is that the accessory building meet all of the requirements of the B2 local business district, zoning district. Five is if there's any other comments that the plan commission or board may have with regard to compatibility, the applicant needs to follow those prior to the issuance of a zoning and building permit. Condition number 6 is that we will be recording a deed restriction on the property stating that the accessory building can only be used for residential purposes. Number 7 is that the petitioner obtained the proper permits, and number 8 is that they pay all of their fees that have been incurred with regard to this approval. So with that, unless staff has any other comments, I'll turn it back over to the Plan Commission.
Any questions for Planner Rybarczyk?
I've got just a quick one, Mr. Chairman, and just for clarification with Planner Rybarczyk, and we've been through this issue before with the development in that area. I mean, you made, I believe, reference to a right of way, and again, on the drawing that's showing a 22-foot offset. Am I correct or need clarification? Is that really a lot line because the road, if you will, is on private property? I mean, that was not dedicated as a public right of way or anything, was it?
You're correct. The Kunze Way, which is to the east of the lot, is a private drive. But the farmstead was created as a separate lot from the rest of the condominium development that you're making reference to. So that is an actual separate standalone lot from Sticks Academy and the veterinary clinic. But the actual front of this lot is Glendale Road. And then the lot line that adjoins the private drive is the side yard. So that's why they only need a 20-foot setback from there. The private drive is not dedicated to the town. We do not maintain it. It's just a right-of-way that's part of that condominium development.
Okay, I guess, thank you for the explanation. I wouldn't call it a right of way because to me that conveys the sense that it's a public street or something. It's a driveway at a side yard offset at a common property line, right?
Correct.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Is there a motion?
I move to approve subject to all of our conditions.
And a second? Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. On to C, ordinance 2017-04 relating to Title 12 Land Division. Is there a motion?
Move to approve.
And it is a recommendation to the town board, yes. And a second.
I will second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. On to D, ordinance 2017-03 relating to Title 13 zoning code and zoning map, again for a recommendation to the town board. Is there a motion?
Move to approve.
And a second? Any discussion? Supervisor Fisher?
Yes, several things. Jamie, do you have that electronically that you can project onto the screen, even though some of us can't see it? Okay. Here's, I guess, a couple questions I've got. I have particular concerns about two issues. One of them is the proposed reduction in the size, minimum size or total square footages of residences. Just an illustrative example, if you can go to RE Residential Estate Zoning District. And while you're dialing that up, I believe that currently, if you go on down to it, currently the zoning ordinance requires a minimum total floor area of 2,500 square feet. Is that correct? Is that down?
Trying to find.
Okay, fair enough. I'll hang on for a minute.
Okay, so it's starts on page 93.
Okay.
And then most of the requirements are on page 94 and 95.
Okay, so the part, I think, is it there that if enacted, this would reduce the total minimum floor area for a single-family residence in that district from 2,500 to 1,200 square feet, I believe.
That's correct.
And the issue or problem that I have with that is go back even to the very first description of what this zoning district is for. It's right at the beginning of the title, and it's hard for me to. Is that the beginning of the RE?
Yeah, so it says the primary purpose of this district is to provide for large single-family residences.
Okay. I got a big problem with that. We've discussed it because that says the primary purpose of this is to provide for large residences. And that exact same verbiage is in 3 of the other districts, residential suburban estate and R1. Residential suburban estate, we're proposing to reduce that from 2,300 to 1,200, and in the R1 from 1,800 to 1,200. And the question I was going to ask him before, I don't believe I believe an average size house in the town of Waukesha at this time is significantly more than 1,200 square feet. I mean, behind increased densities for land use and probably even some reductions when we're talking about going to from 2,500 to 1,200 square feet. I mean, that's less than 50% of that requirement. I suspect that some people in RE zoning districts or that type of thing would not be particularly pleased with property values and so forth if people could build a 1,200 square foot house next to theirs. If the pleasure of the group is to proceed with this, and it would take every one of our 6 residential zoning districts, the RE residential estate, the suburban estate, R1, R2, R3, and R4, and allow all of them to have a minimum house size of 1,200 square feet. If that's the pleasure of the town board, ultimately, I guess so be it. I won't personally support that. I'd support some reduction, but if you're going to do that, I think we sure need to change the verbiage that says the purpose of this is to provide for large residences, because I don't think a 1,200 square foot residence is large in anybody's judgment. So that's my comment about that. I guess I'll go to one other one that I don't think is appropriate, and that would be reducing minimum size lot widths in some residential areas. If enacted, the code would allow, and my bigger concern on that is particularly with R2 residential. Right now, the minimum lot width at the building setback line, which is typically 50 feet from the base setback line or right-of-way line, is 120 feet. And this ordinance change would propose reducing that to 90 feet. That has side yard offset requirements of 20 feet. By the time you do the math, that would mean that any structure would have to be less than 50 feet wide. And I would just submit that, and that's for cul-de-sacs only, that in the town of Waukesha, I believe that most residential structure would exceed 50 feet. I think that's probably below the average. That would effectively preclude any side yard garage entries, which I think in some instances are attractive and appropriate on cul-de-sacs. I think that's going to dramatically change things. And I don't see that a compelling reason has been made to do that. So I can't support the changes to that part either with the selective reduction of lot widths for cul-de-sacs.
Thank you. Any other comments? Is there a motion? I'm sorry, we have a motion and a second on the table. All in favor? Aye. Opposed?
Nay.
No.
And that was Supervisor Fisher and Stigler. Thank you. And motion still carries. On to E, conditional site plan of operation. The petitioner is David H. Lehman Architect for Buddha Haska Corporation. Location is South 46 West 23214 Lonsdale Road. Tax key is WAKT 13889960002. This is for a recommendation to the town board. Planner Rivarchek.
Gotta find my staff report. So before you tonight is the petitioner, the architect for the Buddha Haska Corporation. They are looking to construct an ordination hall shrine for the temple that's on the subject property. The temple was constructed in 1993. There's also an existing residence that's on the property as well that's used as part of the temple. The proposed hall shrine is 35 feet by 23 feet. And then it also has a surrounding concrete porch around it as well. The proposed building height is 30 feet, 4 inches from grade to top. The application states that the hall shrine will be used less than 5 times per year. There's no employees. It's just used for the monks themselves for worship purposes. There'll be no water or sanitation facilities in the facility. I guess what it comes down to is more of the discussion tonight for the Plan Commission and then also for the board to kind of weigh in, is that do we feel that the hall shrine is a principal building or is it an accessory building to the other uses? And the reason we have to make that determination is because it impacts how we measure the height. If we feel that it's a principal building, as the temple and the existing residents have been identified as well, then the height can be 35 feet from grade to peak. If the Plan Commission board deem it to be more of an accessory building, then the maximum height is only allowed 15 feet from grade to peak. Now, we do have exceptions in our ordinance that for every additional foot in height you go, you have to be 2 additional feet from your side yard setback, but that only gets them an additional 10 feet or 25 feet. So there's still an additional 10 feet higher than that. As far as the setbacks, where it's located now, if it's a principal residence or a principal structure, it meets the setbacks. With regard to parking and the site plan and plan of operation that typically goes along with this, that level of detail hasn't been provided. So tonight is just for conceptual review of it. And if we feel that it's a principal structure, you can guide staff to approach it in that manner. And then when they would come back next month with the applicable materials, we would write the staff report accordingly. I know that Chris has kind of reviewed it conceptually from stormwater management. So Chris, I don't know if you have any comments with regard.
Yeah, my comments at this time are pretty generic. I have 4 really. First one deals with erosion control. Little grading plan really hasn't been submitted yet based on the size and the slope of the property. It looks like there'll be at least 3,000 square feet of land disturbance, which will require permits. So I'm requesting they go to the county to obtain that. In addition, several years ago when there was additions to the property, they had a stormwater management plan that was done and completed and approved by the county. I don't believe that the addition of this temple would cause a need to redo the stormwater management plan, but the county may require that the existing plan be amended to account for this. So I'm asking that, or requesting actually, that they go to the county to talk about stormwater management for the property. And then obviously we would like to see grading and site plan so that we can verify setbacks and slopes and that sort of thing. And that is all I have for my report.
Thank you. Attorney Macy?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, I'm reminding the Plan Commission members that this is here for conceptual review. This is an opportunity for the petitioner to present and the staff to highlight things that they've come to their attention and they're working on the project, and for the petitioner to give you some basic information. You cannot prejudge the decision because it'll be subject to a public hearing. So we ask you not to make any comments in favor or opposed to the project whatsoever. What you can say is when you come back for the public hearing, please address this question. They don't address it tonight, they address it at the public hearing. The purpose of the conceptual is to make sure that the purpose of the conceptual is to make sure that the public hearing will be well served. So now we do have a different issue here, and that might be why the planner's waving at me. We have a different issue here, and that's not part of the petition. That's an interpretation of the code as to whether it's principal or accessory. And that's a legislative action, and that you're going to go down the row at some point, and maybe we should do that, first we should let the petitioner do their presentation. Then we're going to get a feeling from the board as to whether it's a principal structure or an accessory structure. And then we're going to go down the board one last time to see at the public hearing what you want to make sure they address, if anything. Does that make sense? You cannot prejudge the matter because the matter is subject to the evidence that will be presented at the public hearing. And that's what you'll make the decision on.
No public hearing. Site plan of operation doesn't require public hearing.
Okay, so we're here conceptual for what purpose?
Just site plan of operation and to talk about whether it's a principal use or an accessory use.
Okay. So you wanted to bring it in for that purpose. So, but still, we shouldn't prejudge it if they're going to be coming back for their final decision. So at this point, the petitioner would be allowed to come up and do their presentation.
Thank you. Good evening.
Good evening. Dave Lehman, architect for the Buddha Temple. This particular site is a little over 3 acres. It's pretty tight. We have adequate parking for the membership now, which is at 100, and we have 50 car spots. So we're meeting that requirement. This particular structure, being a shrine, is basically going to be for ordination of monks, used exclusively by the monks. Public is not involved, the membership is not involved, and as you heard, there's no plumbing in the building, only heating and lighting. We feel, as I feel as their representative, that this should be deemed, because of its usage and how it's being used, 3, maybe 4 times a year, as an ordination process. That this becomes part of the temple as an arm, and it becomes part of the residence as an arm. Now, since the temple and the residence are principal structures, I feel, for my client, that this building we're proposing, the shrine, should also be considered as a primary building with the height that was mentioned and the size that was mentioned. As far as the 2 issues, plan of operation somehow overlooked, that will be provided. As far as the grading plan, that will be provided. And Mark is here, he can speak to that issue about what has to be amended to that plan. And then the 3rd item, I believe, was, you had 3 items there that you needed. Well, the plan of operation, And the grading plan, that's what Mark is going to be working on. And as far as the landscaping, that was it, landscaping. That we did not want to do at this point because we didn't know whether we would get approval for this structure as a primary structure. Yes, we will be providing a landscape plan. So all of that will come in at the next hearing. If there's any questions I can help you with.
Any questions for the petitioner and/or Planner Rybarczyk?
I have
Supervisor
a question for Planner Rybarczyk. Leaving for a minute the issue aside, the opinion determination, whether it's a principal structured accessory building. I understand your comments about the height of the structure that play into it. The changes that are contemplated and discussed with the adoption of changes to Title 13, do we or do we not address modifications to building height in there for public buildings? And assuming that we might, I look at that because if I know we're increasing allowable heights in residential districts, I think I'm right on that, am I not?
Residential, yes, but the public and institutional, which this is zoned. The accessory structure we raised to 18 feet. The principal structure we kept at 35 feet for a non-exposed foundation. So we have left it at, for the principal building, 35 feet, but the accessory building we raised to 18 feet. If this would be adopted with the height, increased height provision, they could go up to 28 feet, not the 35 feet that they want. And I don't know if they would be able to provide us with the increased setback that they would need to get that additional 10 feet in height because of the size of the property. So I really believe that the way that it's been designed, their preference would be, hopefully from the Plan Commission and Board, the determination that it's a principal use.
Okay, let me try one other swing at it. We're not proposing to change the allowable height of a principal structure in the P1 zoning, stays at 35 feet, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, but we are proposing to significantly increase the allowable heights in the residential districts, I believe, are we not? To how much?
We're not, what we did in the districts is we further defined how the height is calculated, whether you have a non-exposed foundation or an exposed foundation.
I understand that, but leaving that aside, if this were, leaving aside if this were residential and they were putting up a residence with the proposed ordinance, that could be how high? That's over 35 feet, I know that.
Well, for a non-exposed foundation in the R1 district, it's 35 feet, and originally it was 35 feet. However, if you have an exposed foundation in the R1 district, you can go as high as 44 feet.
Okay, we did not, so in any of the residential districts, we did not go above 35 feet anyplace.
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Planner Rybarczyk, a question, I don't, this is probably better, maybe better directed to the building inspector, but if it's a principal structure, wouldn't it need water and sanitation facilities? No?
No.
Okay.
And as indicated, I think well by the planner, we struggled with it at the staff meeting and tried to find whatever you had previously acted on that we could try to compare it to. And we analyzed every different, building that had come in the last year or so. And the thing that we found to be most similar was the recent approval of the gazebo at Manuka Park. And we don't require water or septic in a gazebo, but we do consider them principal resident or principal structures in a park district. We don't consider them accessory structures. You've always considered them principal. So that's the closest thing that we could find. They're using it, for their ceremonies. I don't want to use the wrong words, but their ordinations, and, on that limited basis, and that was similar. We thought the pavilion was a pretty good example. We couldn't get anything closer, but if you can think of something closer, that's why we're bringing it to you tonight.
Any other questions for the petitioner or the planner? Then we'll go down the row. Commissioner Flanagan, your feeling principal structure or accessory structure?
I think it's a principal structure.
Commissioner White?
I'm going to right now say it's an accessory building.
Accessory?
Yes.
And Commissioner Miller?
Probably principal.
Commissioner Stigler?
I came in with the idea that this was accessory, but because of the time frame that they're using it, it doesn't qualify. But I guess the explanation that we've gotten here is part of this. I guess I can go on as principal.
And Supervisor Fisher?
Principal structure, I think for two reasons. The preliminary drawings we have of it, I think it is a very substantial structure. I think it has a very unique purpose, so I'll go with principal structure.
And I am in the minority with Commissioner White, and I would have thought that it is an accessory building, but there's still a majority of the board that believes it's principal. Any issues, excuse me, any issues that the commission members would like addressed if this comes before the Plan Commission? I think we can move forward. Thank you.
What was the decision?
A majority of the Plan Commission believes it is a principal structure.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good evening. On to F, accessory structure for Tom Baker at West 227 South 2416 Morningside Circle. Tax key is WAKT 134 2064. This is for a recommendation to the town board. Once again, Planner Rybarczyk, take it away.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The petitioner before you is wanting to construct a 26 by 32, 832 square foot accessory building on the subject property. The height is 15 feet 2 inches as measured from grade to peak. Petitioner has stated that the exterior color of the accessory building will be double 4-inch heritage gray vinyl siding and architectural quarry gray asphalt shingles. The proposed vinyl siding is the color selected by the petitioner as a future color for the principal residence to be completed next year. The current exterior color of the principal residence is prairie wheat. The proposed asphalt shingle color matches that of the principal residence. The windows will be white vinyl clear sliding windows, and the garage doors will be white 9 foot by 8 foot 5-star raised panels, both with white trim. Accessory building will be used for the storage of vehicles and personal items on the subject property. Per our ordinance, because it exceeds 600 square feet, or the maximum height requirement in the zoning districts, it requires approval by the Town Plan Commission and the board. When reviewing the proposal per our ordinance, as far as location, any closer to the primary street than the principal residence, so the petitioner is compliant with that. With regard to the aggregate floor area of the accessory building, the petitioner is in compliance with those provisions. As far as the number of accessory buildings within the district, he can't exceed 3. He is removing the 120 square foot shed that's on the property, so he will only have one structure on the subject property, so the petitioner is in compliance with that. With regard to compatibility, the petitioner is cladding the proposed accessory structure in the color palette that he will be changing the principal residence to early part of next year. So Town Plan Commission and Board will have to make a determination on the compatibility issue there. With regard to setbacks, property owner is in compliance with the setbacks. With regard to the height provision, with regard in the zoning district, it's a maximum of 15 feet. He is at 15 feet, 2 inches. However, the petitioner is setting the building an increase of 2 feet from the side lot line so that he can have the additional 2 inches on the accessory structure. So with that, if the Plan Commission so chooses to make a recommendation to the board, I did put together 9 conditions. The condition number 8 is that within 30 days that the petitioner gets occupancy of the proposed accessory structure, that the shed needs to be taken down. So with that, it's our standard conditions of approval. I'll turn it over to the Planning Commission for any questions.
Thank you. Is Mr. Baker here tonight? Good evening. Come on up. I'm sure Mr. Fisher has a question for you. He likes to.
He's my neighbor. How are things going? That's the only question I have.
Good answer.
There's no eggs in my car.
Any questions for the planner and or the petitioner? Is there a motion?
Motion to approve the request, subject to the condition.
And a second? That was Commissioner Stigler. Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
On to G, accessory structure for Bonnie Look. This is at West 255 South 5991 Oakdale Drive. Tax key is WAKT 1427999. This is for a recommendation to the town board. Planner Rybarczyk.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The petitioner is requesting to construct a agricultural accessory building. The size will be 87 feet by 192 feet, so 16,704 square feet. The height of the accessory building will be 19 feet 8 inches as measured from grade to peak. It will be a pole barn constructed of steel with a concrete foundation. The building is being used for their agricultural practices, so it's going to be used for the storage of hay and then the inside storage of farm equipment. Their existing structures on the site include a home, a 440 square foot detached garage, 660 square foot shed, and a 2,650 square foot barn, and then another barn that's 4,576 square feet. Again, as part of our ordinance, anything that's over 600 square feet requires Plan Commission and Board review. I have reviewed this per our ordinance requirements, and the petitioner is in compliance with the location of the accessory structure is behind the principal residence. With regard to the total aggregate square footage that they're allowed on the property, because they have roughly 250 acres of land, they can put an awful lot of accessory structure on the farm. So they're well within their tolerances. They're actually allowed up to 77,000 square feet of accessory structure that they can put on the farm. They're only at, with the inclusion of this new accessory building, they're only at 25,000 square feet. As far as the setbacks, the building is located far from really any of the property lines that they have. With regard to the height, because this is a farm structure, they're allowed a maximum of 85 feet in height. So they are not approaching that. They're just shy of 20 feet in height. The petitioner has worked with Waukesha County, both planning and zoning, as well as environmental health. Because there is a stream and shoreline zoning and setbacks from the wetlands. The county has signed off on it. The building is outside of shoreline zoning, and it is far enough away from the wetlands that are mapped per the county GIS mapping system, so they felt that an actual delineation of the wetlands was not needed because it was far enough away. So she has met with them and complied with that, and she has got a preliminary site evaluation for the environmental health, and it is far enough away from the existing wells and septic. So with that, I did put together, if the Plan Commission so chooses, I did put together a recommendation to the town board for approval, subject to our standard 10 conditions. So with that, I will turn it back over to, I'm sorry, do you have any comments as far as land resource?
None, sir.
Okay, all right. So with that, we'll turn it back over to the Plan Commissioner for any questions.
Thank you and good evening, Ms. Luck. Any questions for the petitioner and/or planner Rybarczyk? Is there a motion?
Motion to approve, subject to our, I feel like I'm the only guy here. Motion to approve, subject to our.
And a second.
I can second that.
Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Next, H, conception. Oh, I'm sorry. H, conceptual CSM. The petitioner is Paul Skolovich. Location is West 234 South 6040 Big Bend Road. Tax key is WAKT 143-699-8014. Planner Rybarczyk.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Petitioner is requesting a conceptual review of a proposed certified survey map for the division of the 61.87 acre parcel into two lots. Lot 1 would be 20 acres and Lot 2 would be the remnant, 41.87 acres. Petitioner currently lives in the adjacent lot that's located at West 234 South 6040 Big Bend. And Lot 1 and Lot 2 will be created for the petitioner's children to be further subdivided in the future for the other children that they have. With regard to lot area and lot width, the petitioner is proposing to keep the zoning, which would be A1, which requires a minimum lot area of 20 acres with a minimum average lot width of 660 feet. The proposed two-lot CSM is consistent with these requirements. Assuming Lot 2 is redivided in the future, two 20-acre lots would be to Big Bend Road and Town Line Road. So Lot 2 could be further subdivided into additional two 20-acre parcels and meet those requirements as well. One would have access on Big Bend Road and the other one would have access on Town Line Road. With regard to the setbacks, Lot 1 of the proposed CSM includes the existing farmstead and agricultural buildings. It includes a barn that appears to be closer to the south property line than the required 20-foot offset. It is a recommendation of town staff that this nonconformity be corrected as part of the proposed CSM. Petitioner could create a 3-lot CSM adjusting the lot line to make the barn conform to the required offset or remove a portion of the barn to conform to the required offset. So that is something that we'll have to discuss in a few minutes. With regard to the lot shapes, the lots that are being proposed are irregular in shape. What they're doing is they're trying to set this up in such a way that it could have a total of 3 lots so that all of the children could potentially get a 20-acre lot. In doing so, they are creating some irregular lot lines. They're not our standard rectangular lots that we would like to see. So again, that'll be something that the Plan Commission and Board will want to weigh in on as far as the lot shapes. Shoreline jurisdiction, a portion of the lots adjacent to Big Bend Road are within the Waukesha County shoreline and zoning jurisdiction. It is a recommendation of town staff that the proposed CSM be reviewed by the Waukesha County Department of Parks and Land Use Planning and Zoning Division. It may be that Lot 2 might have a notation on it that just says when that lot is further subdivided, that at that time, the delineations of the wetlands should be done. At this point, Lot 2, they're going to continue it being farmed. They don't have any immediate reason to be subdividing it, so therefore we didn't necessarily know if a wetland delineation needed to be done now. Unfortunately, they're only good for 5 years. So with that, I'll turn it over to Engineer Janelli for engineering comments.
Thanks, Jamie. Obviously, this is just a concept, so from a technical perspective, we didn't really do much of a technical review as it relates to bearings and distances and things, but one of the issues that we often come up with when we get concept CSMs like this is what future development plans might be. We understand that the family is trying to divide it up into several large parcels for their own individual use, but given that Fern Drive is I'll call it a cul-de-sac that terminates to the east there, we would probably want to have some deed restriction or some such language in the CSM that further development or division of the property would require the extension of Fern Drive, assuming that there's going to be a subdivision at some day. My fourth comment, kind of relating to what Jamie said in regards to the wetland delineation, our town code requires that a CSM show a delineated wetland. They're proposing to use DNR mapped line work, which is always somewhat suspect sometimes. But given the nature of the CSM and the reason for the CSM, I don't have a problem with that. However, here again, I would suggest that maybe we add some language to the CSM that requires a delineation prior to future development or land disturbing activity. And then a navigability determination. The town code requires that anything that's navigable or potentially navigable be delineated and shown on the CSM. Here again, since there's no proposed development at this stage, I would again suggest that we add some language on the CSM which talks about having a navigability determination done prior to any future land disturbing activity or development. And I would concur with Jamie's comment in which he said we recommend a 3-lot CSM to kind of clean up some of the encroachment issues that are going on with the current farm. And I think that's it for my engineer report.
Thank you. And Mr. Skolovich is in the audience tonight. Good evening. I do have one question for Planner Barczyk. You said that the lots are irregularly shaped, not normally what we would see, but is there anything that it doesn't conform to our code?
No, in our review, we feel it meets our land division ordinance. There is a provision that we look for, a 2-to-1 ratio lots, and we try to get them as rectangular in nature as possible. But throughout the town, there's many circumstances where they're not, strictly 2-to-1 ratio or rectangular in nature. So based on applicants are trying to accomplish here as far as the estate planning, and it sounds like it's still going to be continued to be farmed. I think it's just more of transfer to the children. We don't have an issue.
Thank you. Questions for the petitioner and or the planner?
The one you wanted them to talk about was the 3-lot, is that correct, Mr.? Do we wish to hear from the petitioner as to their reaction to that request, please?
That would be good. Good evening. The question is, the engineer had brought up a potential 3-lot CSM rather than the 2-lot CSM, and what's your feeling on that?
Well, we didn't want to rezone the whole thing. Thought we could do it with a CFM. It's a state planning is what we're after. And 3-acre lot there is where we live. And if we ever have to go to nursing home, that's for that. And the first one, and my daughter sitting here, lives in that house and has put in some money in that house. So we want her to have it. So that nursing homes don't take that away from her. We're getting to that age, we gotta start thinking about the future. Be a lot easier to sell it right now and divide the money up, I can understand, but nobody wants to sell the land, so. It'll be farmed as long as she's alive. She won't let the developers even in the driveway, so don't worry about development.
Didn't
Issue,
really answer the question. So we don't know the history of how you created your 3-acre lot that the barn got too close to the lot line.
Well, the landlord we had, we didn't have a house and he let us build the house on the land before we owned it. And back in the old days, you get a permit and you do what you want to do. And I never realized the lot line didn't mean a darn thing to me because I owned the land, so. And we thought.
But now it would be important because people
Yeah.
wouldn't be able to use the barn
Well,
for a lot of reasons, for animals in
Yeah.
particular.
there
And
won't be any animals on there. If there ever be any animal, it'll be just some sheep or something. It won't be no livestock, large animal livestock.
it wouldn't matter. You wouldn't be able to use the barn for purposes that a lot of people would like to use the barn like that for. And this would be the opportunity to shift your lot a little bit, I believe it's to the south,
Yeah.
Mr. Rabarchik.
Yes,
And so it wouldn't be a rezoning. You said you didn't want to do a rezoning. We understand that. I don't think all they'd have to do is a 3-lot CSM, just shifting 2 lines so that you'd get a little further away. And it wouldn't change anything. You could still end up with 20 for your daughter and 40 for the other children to deal with later, but it would readjust where your 3-acre was. And we were just proposing that, and we wondered because we think in the long run, it would you might make your property more valuable, and this is the opportunity to do it. So, and we're going to go down the line, and we just wanted to get your reaction,
Right.
and then the board will say whether that's what they want to see or not see. So, okay?
that'd be a better option than tearing it down. We thought maybe we could get a variance on that distance too. It isn't that close to the house to do any harm. But we thought we'd worry about that when the time came.
I think the issue with the variance would be that you're gonna have to show a hardship, and that would probably be difficult.
Yeah, I never thought about that when we built that.
So I guess let's go down the line, and would the preference of the commission be to ask for a 3-lot CSM shifting the property lines of the existing house so that the barn doesn't encroach? We'll start with Commissioner Flanagan.
Can I have a
Oh,
question?
go ahead. I'm sorry.
Just for curiosity, what are you encroaching? How much is it on the other side of the lot line at barn?
I don't even know, to tell you the truth.
Is it-
We never staked it up.
That's going to be something that would have to be determined through the CSM. I don't want to go based on the aerial because we all know that there's, a level of error in the county's aerial photography and lot lines and that. So it appears that based on the county's GIS system that it's actually encroaching over the lot line, but until we have an actual survey done of the property, it could be a foot or it could be, over the lot line where we don't know.
Well, I have a question. How far do you have to move that line? What are we
Well,
talking,
the building
30
should
feet?
be, no, the building should be a minimum of 20 feet for A1. If they want to retain the right of ever having animal units in that, it would have to be 50 feet. So I guess the question is that their engineers are going to have to figure out how much room they have in between, because you're going to have to be 20 and 20 feet from or from the barn in order to draw the lot line. And I don't know until it's surveyed if the room is there.
Well, I guess I don't understand. We're talking about this line.
No, the north line.
This, oh, the north line.
Yep.
Ah,
There's a pole shed there. It's over the line.
yeah, I see that.
This is,
Yes, you're
they're
right.
gonna fix it,
I
they gotta
agree.
fix it now. And
I mean, I
we would
guess
hate to have them have to tear it down and say, why didn't we think of that when we did the estate planning? And ma'am, you're a petitioner, you can come up to the microphone. You have to come to the
Come on.
microphone and give us your name, unfortunately.
The boss.
That's why I let her talk, you know.
My question is, we have to investigate what the cost would be to move that lot line. Would it be better for us to tear down that end of the shed, put it back up a few feet down, whatever we need to do in order to make it legal? Is that a better option than to move that lot line? I don't know what the cost is for moving a lot line.
I got a question. I'm sorry, if you're gonna move the building, I mean, would that be something we could put in the agreement to say that in the future, when the time comes and they need to be conforming to the 3 acres, then tear the shed down or move the lot line at that point? And today, just not worry about it, because I know the situation here is nobody's doing anything different on that farm for a long time.
But her question
So I mean,
was, which is more expensive? You'd have to talk to your surveyor because he's already surveyed 60 acres. He's already surveyed the 20 and the 40, and he's ready to put it on a map with 2 lots to create the 20, correct? And so I don't know how much more would be involved to just add your 3-acre parcel. That's a very specific question you would ask him, to go from a 2-lot to a 3-lot and shift our 3-acre parcel a little bit to miss the building either by 20 feet or 50 feet would be perfect. You'd have to ask him what that would cost.
And the cost would be involved with the engineer, not with any other agency or the town. It's not a big deal to move a lot line.
Not when you're doing a certified survey map. That's a great question, but that's when you do it, is with a certified survey map, and you've already done, I would assume, what are they doing?
No, I think what Tony Zanin, their surveyor engineer, has done so far is he's just drawn some lines on an aerial. They have not done the survey of the property yet.
Okay.
I think what Tony's thought process is that because the remnant parcel that would be created is greater than 40 acres, he was going to ask for a waiver on actually doing lot 2. So therefore, he only had to survey the north 20 acres of the farm. And that would probably be less expensive to the property owners than doing a survey of the entire 60 acres.
Okay. Well, I guess then the answer is you have to ask Tony what it would cost to do a 3-lot CSM versus, we don't even know. They're going to have to come back and get a decision of whether they can do a 1 or a 2-lot CSM anyway.
I thought maybe Tony was going to be here tonight and ask that of the plan commission, and he's unfortunately, doesn't seem like he's here tonight. So, and I can't speak on behalf of Tony.
Well, but we don't even have it on as an agenda item to grant the waiver, so. You need to talk to him, and if he has questions, he should call the planner or the engineer.
Thank you.
Thank you. So it appears we need more information is the bottom line.
Well, I think what
I
I'm
think that all
hearing
plays
from
into
the
one.
plan commission, and correct me if I'm wrong, Bill, if I do get a call from Tony that it's the wishes that setback be dealt with, and it's going to be up to Tony and the property owners as to how they want to deal with it, whether they want to take down a section of the building or if they want to do a 3-lot CSM to address it. I guess I would prefer that direction, is so that I can share that with Tony if he contacts me.
Does that have to be done in order for this to work, or can it be done at a future date?
I think that's more of a legal question.
Good question.
The line in question already exists.
Yes.
Well, they're going to have all kinds of problems if it actually goes over the line. You know that. I mean, they're doing estate planning, and so if anybody ever goes to try to sell and the building encroaches, so at the very minimum, they're gonna wanna find out whether it encroaches or not. And if it does encroach, then they really should do something. But technically, if they're not modifying an existing line, then, and it's not encroaching, then we don't usually get too involved with it. We're just making a practical suggestion as a staff. So your answer to your question is, do they have to deal with it now? Only if you tell them that you're not going to grant the waiver, you're going to require a 3-lot CSM, then they'd have to deal with it. But if they bring in a 2-lot CSM and ignore the 3-acre parcel, or they come in with a 20-acre CSM for the 1 lot and you grant the waiver, then it'll be the way it is. But we would be remiss as a staff not to mention it and have them come back years later and get a ticket for putting animals in a barn they can't put animals in. And somebody said, why didn't you tell us back in 2017? We could have fixed this problem. Does that answer your question? I mean, I'm not saying we should.
I understand where you're coming from on that, but like I said, if you want to put animals in the barn and later on, everything you do restriction or whatever you want, and say, now you have to deal with it today.
But
They're not going anywhere with it, the barn's gonna stay, and the dog's not going anywhere. They've lived with it since the barn's been up, and it's not something that.
The barn's on the 20,
Sell the 3 acres, I
Yes.
guess that's when you need to have it in writing, and then it's done. But, and that's what I'm asking, are you gonna put it in writing today and say, it can't be on for 3 acres? Are you gonna come in 2 weeks from now and say, take that barn down because it's legal? And they leave it up there for the time being until the house is sold or something is sold, then say you gotta deal with it at that time. Either take it down or move the lot line. Because I looked at the lot line, and I'm not so sure that's gonna come out close to the house, and it's gonna be in the driveway. So you have to have the lot line. Because you're talking 50 feet.
Well, it's a little more complicated than what you're trying to put it out as to whether somebody could complain, or it's always more complicated. We can't find a building permit for the barn and the addition. So we don't know whether it predates the code or whether, as he said, we just added on to things when we wanted to add on to things, okay? And so that's why I can't state with specificity. The planner has stated it appropriately. We're looking for direction as to what to say to his engineer. You're going to make a decision whether you're going to require a 1-lot, a 2-lot, or a 3-lot certified survey map. And obviously, if you did a 3-lot certified survey map, they'd have to fix the barn problem. Okay? That's the only way I can say it. That's why we're bringing it here as a policy decision.
So I guess we could go around the horn.
Mr. I
You have
got a
question?
comment. I'm kind of in agreement with what Bob has been talking. It's a family, in the family, and if we can somehow put verbiage in the deed stating that when it resells, and if they're in agreement with that, we can leave it as is for now, but in the resale, when the time comes, we could do that. I would prefer if we could move the lot line, but I don't think it's going to be in your favor. So I'm kind of sticking with Bob if we could do some verbiage, if that's possible. And I'll let the attorney do that language. If we could do something like that, I'd be in favor of leaving it the barn where it's at and the lot line there. So,
Mr. Flanagan?
Well, with all this acreage, my head is spinning. We ought to be able to redraw that so that it works now and in the future. I mean, I guess who came up with the sizes of the parcel? I guess, wouldn't you be able to redraw this thing and still have the 3 or 4 lots out of this?
Well, the problem is, Mr. Flanagan, is that all of the structures are located in while it's still 60 acres, they're all located in a condensed area.
But there's.
I'm just going to go out on a limb and assume that the petitioner has already looked at that and trying to redraw it so that it would work without having to tear down the barn, or. Come on up to the.
I think we really didn't, we thought we could get a waiver or leave it there until the 3-acre parcel was done with. We never really, I knew it was there. When I built that, I had a permit, but the old boys have the inspection we do today. We had already built the house under 3 acres. And so I never thought nothing of it. So I never thought I'd get old. I guess that's the thing. And all of a sudden my friends are dying. I thought, gee, we better start doing something with this land.
That 60th birthday snuck up on you.
60, my foot.
I would be fine with allowing it to remain until such time as a 3-acre parcel is developed. Commissioner Flanagan?
I'll make that motion.
Supervisor?
Well, we're not making a motion.
Yeah, there's no motion.
That's right.
Commissioner Miller? I think we've heard from Commissioner Stigler and Supervisor Fisher.
I guess my point of view is a little bit different, and it's not as, you can remember the town plan commission or anything, but I think it's just, I think this is almost common sense. I mean, opportunity is knocking. I would really encourage you to clean it up at this point and you're done with it. And I can't believe that the cost of surveying services to do that and clean it up at this point in time might be minuscule compared to the headache and stuff you may have down the road with it.
Well, I don't think I'm going to worry about it. I think that the younger generation, you guys will probably be all gone anyway, so. Oh.
Touche, but if anybody ever goes to sell the properties and that type of thing, they're going to encounter the issue at that point in time. So
I'm sure they will.
I guess that's something you could leave to the those that are yet to come. It's my opinion.
All right. Well, I think we've given some direction. You see what
one way or the other.
I think the Plan Commission is looking forward to allow that to take place, the fixing of that issue at some point in the future.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think we might be able to sell tickets next week to this, or next month. This is a pretty good show. Thank you. On to I, Conceptual Development Review. The petitioner is Jack Gaudian. Company is Legend at Merrill Hills. Location is part of the southeast quarter of Section 18, T6NR 19 East. The tax key number is WAKT 1368-97003. Planner Rybarczyk.
My team's bringing in a map, maybe it will help as well. Good evening. I know we've got a lot to cover here. Thanks for allowing me to speak and try to present the vision of what we're trying to do with this parcel. First of all, my name's Jack Gaudian. I own the club myself. I own the development land myself. I saw the article in the Freeman. It's not exactly accurate, but not to criticize the Freeman. I'm also an owner in multiple developments and other country clubs. Each of my country clubs have separate ownership interests, primarily with the Kuhlman family and myself. In this case, I purchased this club and development land in June of 2013. Why it's important to do a little history on me and the clubs, and I apologize if I'm going to bore anyone. You need to understand that my clubs are what's driving the demand for the development. And it's a very unique situation, and this becomes a very unique opportunity. We began development, the Kuhlman family and I, of the Legend at Brandybrook, our first property, in 2001. That property was finished and opened in 2003. There's 110 residential on that site, and those were all pre-sold basically, or we pre-sold the lots. The homes were later developed. In fact, there's still some that haven't developed, but literally pre-sold a year before we put the roads in. Our second acquisition was in partnership with Fiduciary Real Estate. We bought the Legend at Bergamot in Oregon, just south of Madison in Dane County. A huge real estate development deal with a developer that basically ran out of money at the beginning of the financial collapse of real estate and golf clubs, quite frankly. This was in 2007. We put about 10 million in amenities in that property, huge clubhouse, water park, and there's about 500 plus residential units under development there. We're about at 300 now, of which there are 2 gated communities inside that one singular development. So it's interesting, there's no gated communities other than one small one here in Waukesha County, and we have 2 in one property in Dane County. 2009 went right after the world ended. When I say the world ended, in 2008, when the financial collapse came, it's the most challenging time these last 9 years in the history of the club business. 1,000 clubs around the country have closed. Many of them being redeveloped completely into real estate because it's the only thing they can do. They can't get members, they can't justify the business, and many of thii things are being redeveloped to a higher use. I'm not suggesting any of these may or would have, but I would suggest Bergamot might have. At Bristol Cone, the developer, when the world kind of ended, decided he didn't want to be in the club business anymore. We bought the club, just 4 or 5 lots with it. He had pre-developed almost all the real estate there. There's about 250 residential units at the Legend at Bristol Cone. Why does that matter? I don't think the members at Merrill Hills Country Club would have ever approached me if those 3 things hadn't happened. And why does that matter? Merrill Hills Country Club, we are not Merrill Hills Country Club anymore. It's the Legend at Merrill Hills, a separate entity. I can't speak to the past and all the development. I can speak to a little bit of a framework of how Merrill Hills acquired the land. But Merrill Hills Country Club was a member-owned private club, which is a very consistent model for the club industry, where the members own the asset, whatever it costs to run, the members kick in, whether that's in dues or assessments. And so everyone's a stockholder, basically. I don't have that in my organization. I'm the owner, and members pay dues, and there are customers, and they have refundable deposits, but they don't own any stock in our business. Unique for this market. Merrill Hills bought the land that we're talking about here, I believe in 1999 or 2000. Apologize if I'm not 100% accurate on that. To develop primarily an expanded driving range facility, and then to obviously have it for future development, which never occurred under that structure. Merrill Hills went through some financial and club problems that many clubs went through. But in 2008 through 2012 was their most difficult time as a business. And the members came to me with the request, can you save this business? Because our bank can't give us any more money. We can't pay all our bills. We're upside down. This business can close. That's what came to me in basically February of 2013. We're able to work together to not only get the club in a better financial position, save the club, but in my opinion, we've put the club in a much better position than it's ever been in, physically, certainly from a business perspective, and we're very proud of it, considering the alternative. All that matters because members drive all of this. Even though my members don't have stock in my business, without members and membership growth, I don't have 4 properties right now. So I have 3 separate country clubs in Waukesha County. To the members, it's one club. They just drive 15 minutes to each one. They're each separate individual businesses, which allow me to reach members geographically. Again, why does that matter? Members want to live close to their business. They want to live close to their club. They don't want to live 45 minutes away. They'd like to live at their club, which is what this really gets to. Members would love to live where they play. I would rather create benefit that grows my club and gives benefit to my members. Residential real estate is that entity. So we've kind of overcome the bad situation, but for me, job one was to ensure that Merrill Hills became stable. It needed a lot of financial investment. I've to date put over $3 million of capital improvements into that property. And we've turned it around. We've now regained its rightful position as a premier club in not in Waukesha County, but in the state. And we're really proud of it. And I know the members are. And I think there's, of all the things that have happened at that club, if you want to talk emotion, and I know we're going to talk about our neighbors and how important it is that they buy into what we're trying to do here. The emotion of members having to sell their club to keep it open was a lot more dramatic in sitting in those meetings with those members than well, it just doesn't happen, I guess, is my point. But the members are proud of where we are, and now because of where we are, they want to live there. And so we're at that stage now to try to develop this real estate in a way that best benefits the members, absolutely enhances this from a tax base and from an aesthetic space for our neighbors, and we've looked at a million different options here. I'll be honest with you, within 3 weeks of purchasing the club, the DOT called and asked if I'd sell for the extension to go right through the property. I could have flipped it and gone, except I'm in the club business. And I'd made a whole lot of commitments to the members of the club to try to make a quick buck and run this. That's what it could have been. The bank that would have repossessed this property had ultimate plans to develop the whole site if that's what they had to do. They weren't going to run a country club. So obviously we dismissed that categorically, or the members would have burned my house down. We also looked at maximizing the density on the site by annexing this into Waukesha, in the city of Waukesha, running the sewer, which is obviously expensive, maximizing density on the site. And honestly, that just didn't feel right to us, timing. And quite frankly, we don't like the city of Waukesha taxes. So through the development of this, I'd like to introduce Josh Podelko, my engineer, and Mary Claire Lancer, who's helping us with our community outreach. We spent a lot of time working on this, but I always still work backwards from the members and how we can create a development that everyone's going to be proud of. This will be a singular development. There will be nothing like this in Waukesha County, and quite frankly, in the state of Wisconsin. One, because the club's successful, and these are members that want to be there. Two, because we're really proposing a very less dense residential development that could be put on the site as it is. And what we're doing is we're targeting members that look a lot like me. I built the first home at the Legend at Brandybrook. When I built it, I had a 1-year-old and a 6-year-old. Now one's in college and one's about to be gone. I have a house that I built there. Do I need the house that I built? Maybe I want to live in a place with lower taxes, build a nice, smaller, empty nester house, and have a place down south that would be my primary residence, and this would be my secondary residence. And basically, a vacation home is not how I'm going to do it, but I have a whole lot of members that joined me 15 years ago, look exactly like me now, that live in a big development, in a big house, that pay big tax, and don't need all that space. And so we're really aiming our development backwards from that group. It's a significant group in our club. And with that, you get less traffic. They want the security of gates because they want to shut their home down. They want to be able to take a private cart to the club because that's even better than driving to the club. And they can maybe have one more drink at the club and drive a cart path home. We're probably not going to get too many of them pulled over on a cart path, which means there's less traffic. It's a lifestyle. It's not unique to the golf business. It's done everywhere in the South. Many of these folks already have a place in Naples or Arizona or other places that offer just that. They just intend to stay up in Wisconsin for that mid-May to mid-October period, and that's how most of these folks would use the club. That's why they don't mind owning the roads, paying for the roads, plowing the roads, and being able to shut their home down. And again, the town of Waukesha tax rate is important to them if they're paying Heartland taxes at the Legend of Bristol-Cohen or even at the Legend of Brandybrook, the taxes they pay in Wales. Again, these are members that already know each other, wanting to move in with their friends that are already there. So much of this development is already feeding off itself, members bringing their other members. And they understand what a gated community is. As a club owner, I'm the one that actually, believe it or not, is the most impacted by the development. I'm a club owner. I'm not going anywhere. I'm not a developer that's going to develop this and leave. I'm a club owner that is willing to now try to redirect stormwater through my golf course to address community concerns. And I'd rather people that are living in my community that are members so that they have the same common goals that I do, which is the best benefit I can give my members, and that they understand and respect the land and the other members. How does this benefit the neighbors? Well, one, back to lower density. We're lowering traffic. In a lot of conversations with the town and understanding the need for two entries, which quite frankly, we didn't understand at first. We thought we'd be able to just go right to Highway 59 until we found out that 60 years ago by the original landowner. I didn't even know that till a few days ago. We just knew that once we found out that DOT had no interest in granting us access through that spot, and it's because of Sun Valley Trails access, that in conversations with staff and general conversations of how do we best make this work from fire and protection standpoint, traffic standpoint, and quite frankly, a development that looks and feels right. And the goal of a two entry point development arose from that. We even tried to work with the DOT to just give us emergency access on Highway 59, and there was zero interest. There's just no conversation. I think Josh has provided a letter he's gotten from the DOT that deals with their insistence that we have to go a different route. One of the other benefits here is our full intention to improve the existing stormwater drainage. Again, I didn't develop the range, I just bought it, 15 years after it was developed. But I've heard that there are challenges with stormwater on both ends of it, basically. And by redirecting all stormwater from this property through the golf course, it's our intention to improve everyone's situation on a stormwater basis. There's going to be high-value homes in this development with high standards. That's good for everyone. I think the community is going to be exceptionally proud of what gets done. And this isn't going to take long. This is going to get built out quickly. I had well over 80 members in a lottery, and I haven't talked to them since March about this process and in our club for this property. We want to be incredibly sensitive to the setting. The isolated natural resource area that you see, we're adding ponds and aesthetics in the ponds like fountains that not only help retain stormwater, but create some aesthetic beauty to the site. The development will be curbed and guttered, high-end landscaping, gated entries. Again, we have a lot of experience with that. And much of what I'll do will look very similar to what I've done at the Legend at Bergamot. Benefits to the town. Well, it's a high-end community. And we're looking at, I would estimate about $25 million in tax base when built out. These homes are going to average around $750,000 would be my bet. We have a lot of folks wanting to build 3,000 square foot ranches, but they start there and they end up a little bigger, and you combine that with the lot values, and that's what we'll probably see here. We'll see stuff in the high fives to probably $1.5 million in this development. So in many ways, it won't be a great deal different than what we have at Brandy Brook, but fewer on the higher end side. We've discussed tax base. The fact that these residents, by and large, aren't adding any service requirements of the town. Most of them are empty nesters, if not all of them. So this isn't about a school district or adding any stress on that. They will be the least amount of traffic on the road that I could, if I was to pick a customer that would put the least amount of cars on the road, this would be the one, because they're not running kids to soccer practice. They're here May to October, and quite frankly, if they can play golf every day, they'll be driving a golf cart to the club as their primary means of transportation. And they'll be gone, a good percentage of these folks, from probably 1st of November till mid-May. Outside of that, obviously, it's important to understand how the town feels about it, how our neighbors feel about it. I'd like, if you have, what I'd like to introduce first is Josh Podelko, our development engineer. So if you have technical questions, I'd much prefer Josh answer them than me kind of wing it a little bit on them. Mayor Claire has been going door to door and meeting with neighbors, trying to better present this in a way that, because I think there's a lot of concern that, quite frankly, isn't founded in fact. That let's all discuss what the facts are, and then go from there. So Mary Claire's hopefully been able to at least present what our goals are here. and how we're trying to do this in a way. But I would like to stress again, when this is all done, I'll still be there. Because for me, it's still about owning and operating the Legend at Merrill Hills, the club, and how this community can tie to that. This community will help me keep members. If a member can't downsize, they'll just have a place in Florida and stay there and drop out of the club. So this is a way for us, quite frankly, to have long-term members, long-term member benefit, good neighbors, in my opinion. I would also stress that we've got great relationships in all our other developments with our immediate neighbors. And I'll stand on our reputation. It's most of my stuff you can drive to pretty quickly. You can drive through the Legend at Brandybrook, just 10 minutes up the road. Bristol Cone's only 15 minutes up the road. We did not develop the Legend at Bristol Cone, but we've got a great relationship with the HOA and the Village of Heartland as well. So with that said, I'd like to let Josh more technically describe what we're doing here. And then obviously Mary Claire is here to answer questions and to share what she's learned in meeting with the residents. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Josh, you want to go first, or you want Jamie to?
We can, or if you just want to continue, because I mean, yeah.
Good evening, everyone. Josh Fidelko, Trio Engineering. I knew you before. Our specialty is land planning, land development, and to have an opportunity like this property presents is unique and exciting. And for me, I think it's important when you take on an effort like this to understand the land, to go slow to understand topography, vegetation, slopes, drainage, soil characteristics, really the sense of setting. So what you see here has been an evolution. And the idea with the evolution is to improve it with each iteration. So from where we started to where we are, I believe we've done a lot of improvements, addressed a lot of concerns that we heard just through the neighborhood and that we've seen on the site. We've done things we think and believe are an improvement to the area. Development planning wise, this property, before it was a driving range, majority of it was farmed. The driving range happened, was created, and the rest of the property sort of was left to go dormant, and that's the status of it today. When we started this project, we had wetlands delineated, needed to know where the environmental areas were, so we knew we had an isolated natural resource area, a wooded area in the middle of the site. Wetlands in a few locations, some were bigger than the DNR or sewer pack mapping had indicated, including the one closest to Highway 59. But we use all that. We use the environmental characteristics, some of the vegetation that's out there, the topography to set a theme, a setting for the layout for the roads. For this property, it's an individual well and septic. So each lot has its own well, has its own septic. Any water used by the homeowner or taken out of the ground is put back into the ground in the same spot. It's kind of a natural circulation. We identified and tested all the locations that you see on this site to prove that the septic works for what we have for each lot that we're proposing. Layout wise, we look at drainage, how it works. We let homes sit where most advantageous, where it makes sense, from preserving certain vegetation, minimizing grading, using the slopes to our advantage, allowing exposures to happen where in some cases we're allowed. The roads will be the primary conveyance of stormwater to our stormwater detention facilities. We've intentionally oversized what we're providing for stormwater. And when I say oversized, it's more than you would have to provide to meet the minimums. And we're doing that to improve stormwater drainage. One of the things that we heard early on was that there was already drainage concerns on Sun Valley Trail. Not looking at the history, but looking at what can this development do to help and improve that. One thing that became apparent was any development that we do here should really stop our drainage to the maximum extent that we can from flowing west. Keep it on site, try to manage it on site, cleaning it up, infiltrating as much as the land allows. And that's what we're doing here. Along with that, different areas around the driving range as part of that oversized expansion area to provide additional infiltration, kind of spread out the water, let it soak back naturally into the ground. Really try to promote recharge of the groundwater instead of just aiming it at a low point and letting it run downhill as it does today. So looking holistically, looking at what's good for the neighborhood, good for the whole area. And I think we've accomplished it. We didn't try to pack this development in. We have 32 new lots, amply spaced. We intentionally have a private road. And with that, we have a little smaller front setbacks. We're 35 feet from that private road right away. And what that does is provides a better backyard. It keeps the neighborhood a little bit tighter. Neighbors here are kind of expected to have a little bit of a social setting, and a 35-foot front setback allows that. We set lot widths. We have a minimum 110 feet. You can see we have a variety of much wider lots. The idea in that lot width is to support side entry garages in a number of locations. And you can see we start to plan that out as we show typical building pads where the homes are planned to be located. With this development, we have the need and requirement from the town to do a cul-de-sac to formally complete Sun Valley Trail. The code, the Public Works Code for the town is traditional. It talks about a traditional cul-de-sac, which is all pavement, hard surface. And in the code, it requires a 45-foot radius. It's basically just a big sea of asphalt. What we've found working in a number of communities, and most recently, you've seen the change in the city of Waukesha in their details and in their planning. It's really driven by emergency response vehicles. It's actually driven by the DPW, the snowplow drivers. They actually want to see islands, larger radiuses, exactly what we proposed on Sun Valley Trail, because it's easier to plow and easier for emergency vehicles to navigate. And it's different than your normal, but it aesthetically looks great. If you're on Sun Valley Trail, you want to see this at the end of it. It's a great entry moment into the development, but it's also best for snow plowing and emergency response circulation. Cul-de-sacs or long dead-end roads within our development all meet length requirements for the town. The longest cul-de-sac that we have is just over 900 feet, and that's the one that extends up to the northwest. We intentionally have the ability to have through traffic within our complex or our community itself. The gates for the development. The gate on Sun Valley Trail is intended to be outside the right-of-way, outside the loop, in that darker green area. We're calling, I believe, areas 2 and 3. So right there is where our gate feature will be. The gate on Oak Knoll Drive is southwest of the loop that you see on what we're calling lot 33. The intention there, we want to keep some of the trees that are right at the corner of Oak Knoll Drive, enhance some of the landscaping, have some entry signage. It's an intentional decision. If you're to come off of Oak Knoll Drive and into this development, you'd be deciding.
Pointer?
So we're making a decision right here if we're going to come into this development. We provide a loop here so that we don't have staging or queuing that occurs on Oak Knoll Drive if for any reason the gate, you don't have an opener for the gate and you're doing a delivery. So the idea is to have queuing and turnaround capabilities here. You're already making a decision. You're not considering this a public road whatsoever. On the gate, we're proposing to be located right here. The intent is that lot 33 have a driveway on this entry drive. So we're intentionally not putting that inside the gate, keeping that driveway outside. You'll see in this plan that through this whole effort, there is some modifications to the driving range itself, changing the orientation and setting of it. What we found, or what Jack has found in the operations, is that this is a extremely large driving range, much larger than what's actually necessary. So we're able to bring it down a little bit in size. We worked pretty hard studying, different distances, setting these homes more than adequately far enough away from the driving range to avoid issues with errant balls, somebody with or myself with a bad slice, or the big hitters, people that may drive it deep on a driving range. All that was taken into consideration in this layout. It's exciting. Another item that I wanted to discuss, in our iterations, we had more lots that kind of came up and went up in here. And in doing that, in earlier iterations, this was a longer cul-de-sac. A few additional lots fit in here. In this final evolution, we actually pulled the cul-de-sac back and kept two pretty distinct home settings. When you're out on the site, it's essentially open where those homes are sitting. Our intention was to set the home where they want it to be. We have private roads. With this layout, we can create a few private, kind of exclusive driveways. It's really an interesting, kind of really private, secluded approach to your home. So it gives us a different option, a different lifestyle. But again, this layout worked with a cul-de-sac here. We feel it works better both for the moment it creates for each of these lots, the opportunity it improves for us to enhance landscaping where we want to and where we need it there. That was the whole rationale for kind of the iteration down in this area. So everything you see is kind of pulled back our footprint, try to fit homes where it makes sense on the land. So our hope, our goal in doing this is to take your feedback, and we've taken the feedback we've received so far and tried to improve this. I'm looking forward to hearing what everyone has to say and answering any questions that you may have.
Thanks.
Good evening, I'm Mary Claire, and that's exactly how I introduced myself to neighbors when I visited them door to door. This door-to-door outreach is neither required nor typical, but Jack asked me to visit neighbors out of respect. So on 3 days, Saturday, July 29th, Monday, July 31st, and Saturday, August 5th, I visited neighbors to the east, west, and south of the site. I visited a total of 38 properties, and at those properties was able to speak with someone at 26 of them. Some conversations were about process and enforceable requirements that would be part of any approvals. I visited addresses within 300 feet of the subject property. These are people who public hearing notice. Then included more homes on Sun Valley Trail and Oak Knoll Drive. I introduced myself, clearly stated that I am hired to provide information, answer questions, write down comments to share with the development team and with public officials, and follow up with anyone who wants more information. I went through as much of the information binder, which includes the entire submittal, and provided, as much as desired, noted comments on large index cards, super high tech, and provided my business card to anybody who would have additional questions or comments. My visit times ranged from a few minutes to more than 1 hour per neighbor. I urged neighbors to share my contact information with anyone else who would like a visit or a call. When no one answered the door at homes closest to the site, I visited a second time. I think instead of going through all of the comments, because that's more appropriate for public hearing, and I'm sure you'll hear many of those tonight. I thought I would tell you what the key issues I found and some of the questions that were raised, because I have a feeling that Jamie's going to be answering some of those questions tonight. So people were concerned about access, Oak Knoll Drive. One of the questions that was asked, if it needs to be widened, who pays for that? But nobody wants it widened. Sun Valley Trail, questions about why not access onto Highway 50. People suggested alternative access points. They want clarification about expected additional trips at each access point. They say current roads aren't properly maintained. Will the developer repair any? What is the construction route, construction hours, construction timeline, dust control? Will trucks be allowed on these roads? Will there be a traffic study? Would prefer gates be before the cul-de-sacs? People talked about stormwater drainage west of the site, some east of the site. Questions about new mound systems and wells. Will they interfere with existing neighbors' septics and water? Will they deplete the aquifer? Will they affect water quality? What about lighting, street lighting, light pollution, noise from construction or more traffic and more people? Why are some trees marked? Are these to be removed? How will property taxes for existing homes be affected? Some people had preferred uses for this acreage. Some want nothing ever to be developed here, keep it as it is. Suggest make it a town park, expand the golf course, or we don't need any more homes at all in the town. Want clarification that there will be gated entrance but no fences surrounding the property. People wanted to know why we are on site plan 11 and they're first hearing about it now, and I was quick to explain that many of these discussions are technical in nature and that it's a better use of people's time to have many of these things worked out between Josh, for instance, and Chris and Jamie. I do remain available to anyone who would like a call. A more detailed report about the door-to-door outreach and verbatim comments will be provided to you at the time of public hearing. Thank you.
Thank you. Planner Ray Barczyk, take it away.
Well, I think what I'll do is I'll try to fill in the gaps based on time, and everybody's been kind of patiently sitting and waiting. I think one point of clarification that should be made is that what's being presented by the petitioners is not a conventional subdivision development like people typically see. This is actually going to be a condominium plat that they're proposing, and the difference is it's going to be one large lot like you see up there. The black heavy line is going to be the lot itself. All of the individual smaller lots are actually going to be units. They're going to be condominium units that are going to be sold to the respective buyers. The reason they're doing that is that then allows them internally to have private roads that will not be dedicated to the town and will not be maintained by the town. It's going to be the developer and the homeowners association or the condominium association that they're going to be creating are going to be required to maintain those roads and plow those roads. So I think we need to make that distinction that this is not a conventional subdivision plat that they're proposing. It's a condominium plat. Along those lines is they're also looking at doing a conditional use for a residential planned unit development. What the residential planned unit development allows them to do is that based on the percentage of open space that they're going to create, and the open space means that it would be common areas used by the condominium association for recreation purposes, that allows them certain flexibilities in lot size, lot area, lot width, setback requirements, and then also density as well. So I think that should be kind of clarified as well. From my standpoint, Chris and I, we would like to say for the record that when this was first brought to the town, they were on concept site plan 10. So I don't want anybody to think that we've been working on this behind. When it was first presented to us, it was concept site plan 10. 1 through 9 was just kind of the developer himself working with his consultants. So we've actually seen one other iteration based on this. A little bit about the development. The condominium units are going to range from 20,000 square feet to 60,000 square feet in area, with really an average of 33,000 square feet in size, so just less than an acre, about 3/4 of an acre. All the units, as was mentioned, will be served by individual private well and septic systems. There will be some common open space areas that are being provided. They're preserving a portion of the isolated natural resource area, not all of it, but a portion of it. They are creating a greenway or buffer area around the driving range. At the town's request, we denied them the ability to count the driving range itself as open space. So in their open space calculations, it excludes the driving range because we feel that the driving range is more part of the golf course and the commercial operation of the golf course, not as part of the residential development. So just because you see the driving range at the far north end, don't assume that that was part of their calculation for open space. The cursory review that I've done of the condominium plat from a planning standpoint, and then I'll turn it over to Chris, is, as I had mentioned, they're proposing a condominium plat and then also a conditional use for the residential planned unit development. In looking at the requirements of our planned unit development, if they would provide 30% open space with the R1 zoning district, which the entire parcel is zoned R1, they would be allowed up to 43 units. Their concept plan provides 33.2% open space, and they're providing 32 units, 33 if you include the unit that is off of Oak Knoll Drive. Under the R1 zoning district, if this was a conventional subdivision, they would be required to do 1 acre lots with a minimum of 150 feet. Again, because they're asking for the conditional use in the residential PUD. The residential PUD grants them flexibility. So under the PUD, they're looking at, instead of a minimum 1 acre lot, they're looking at roughly an average of 33,000 square feet, so about 3/4 of an acre. And their average width is 110 feet in width. As part of the PUD process, when we get to that point, which will be other meetings coming forward, the Plan Commission Board has a right to set the minimum and maximum lot sizes if they want as a condition to approval of the PUD. Why, if you ask why would the town want to do that? Well, you could do it if you want to increase the open space that you want to see as part of the development. You could do that by setting minimum or maximum sizes for the lots. But again, that's a policy decision. There is a isolated natural resource area that is on site. Very hard to see on the screen, but it is identified by this orange line that comes down. That is identified by Waukesha County. It's based again on aerial photography and kind of the drip line of the trees. What is in the green area here is what they are presenting to be preserved as that natural resource area. As you can see, the condominium units in some of these areas do exceed into the isolated natural resource area. It does not necessarily mean that people will have the right, if they buy that unit, to clear cut those woods. However, I think it's a discussion that the Plan Commission Board should have, that because a lot of these lots do include a portion of the isolated natural resource area, would you prefer to see those condominium units be smaller so that the isolated natural resource area is preserved in greater extent in perpetuity. So that's something that will have to be discussed. There are numerous units that surround the isolated natural resource area where the actual proposed septic field itself will be located inside the isolated natural resource area. Again, this is allowed within Waukesha County. However, we should discuss about the amount of disturbance that can be done for the placement of those septic fields. The building pads themselves for the homes are all outside of the actual, isolated natural resource area, but as they're designed, they're not large enough to have the septic fields outside of the isolated natural resource area. So again, there should be some discussion from Plan Commission and Board as to your opinion about that.
Planner Ray Barsha, could you define the difference between a wetland, an isolated natural conservancy? What's special about a?
So with regard to environmental corridors, there's 3 levels. There's primary environmental corridor, secondary environmental corridor, and isolated natural resource areas. On a scale of preservation, it's just that primary, secondary, isolated natural resource is the 3rd level. Primary, they're basically identified by basically the geographic size. So let's say for discussion purposes, primary isolated natural resource is 20 acres or greater. Secondary environmental corridor may be 10 acres in size, and then an isolated natural resource area is much smaller. They're 5 acres or they're smaller areas. Again, for explanation purposes, I threw those thresholds out there. I don't know them off the top of my head. In most cases, and even through the town's comprehensive plan, primary environmental corridors, we try at the all extent possible to preserve them. We want all development, building limitations, try to be outside of those areas. Secondary environmental corridors, very similar. We try to preserve those at all extents possible. Unfortunately, isolated natural resource areas, while each community has a different feeling about them, I think we would like to try to preserve them as much as we can, but because they're usually very small in area and small pockets in nature, unfortunately, as part of development, they don't tend to be preserved as much as the other 2, and I think a lady had spoke to that earlier today on that behalf. Wetlands, those fall in a completely different classification. Wetlands are protected through state and federal regulations. We have to have the proper setbacks from wetlands. In the town's case, it's a 30-foot no buffer, no touch zone, so you can't even do grading within that 30-foot buffer area. So wetlands are much different than primary, secondary, and isolated natural resources. In this case, we don't have any conservation. I'll leave that for another day. With regard to kind of in the same area, lot 22 and lot 23, again, if this was more of a conventional subdivision, it would not meet our requirements for our land division ordinance because we would deem them flag lots, meaning they don't necessarily have the proper road frontage that we require. However, this is a condominium plat. It does fall under different requirements. And also because they're requesting the residential plan unit development, that provides them flexibility on lot size, lot configuration, and lot width. However, I still think I brought it up as a discussion item in my staff report because we had multiple lengthy discussions when we just went through Title 12 and Title 13, talking about flag lots and lot widths on public roads. I thought that I should bring it to the attention of the Plan Commission and the board as to, your opinion on these 2 particular lots. We also have lots 17 and 18, which are double frontage lots, meaning they have road both on the front and the back side of the lot. While these could potentially be addressed in the condominium documents, the restrictive covenants as to what the actual front of the lot is and what the rear of the lot is. I think that there's probably a different alteration of these two lots that they could be both configured in a different way that we don't have double frontage lots. So again, I bring that up for kind of discussion purposes tonight. I think with regard to the Sun Valley Drive and the old Knoll Drive and the cul-de-sacs, whether they're public or private, or meet our requirements, I think Engineer Christianelli will touch on those. And then staff did request from the developer written documentation from DOT with regard to actually having the access come on to South Trunk Highway 59 versus Sun Valley Trail or Oak Knoll Trail. And we did just receive today, and I believe it's on the table in front of everybody, the official letter from DOT saying that access would not be granted from DOT on 259, that DOT feels that there's sufficient access from Sun Valley Trail and Oak Knoll Trail for this development. So with that, those are my planning comments. I'll turn it over to Engineer Ginelli for engineering comments.
Thanks, Jamie. I have, my letter's got 8 comments in it. Many of them we've kind of talked about already. Excuse me. My first comment, Highway 59, I think as staff, we're desperately seeking access onto Highway 59. And I think the letter that's in front of you today kind of explains why the DOT is, I guess, reluctant or never gonna provide access there. So, and the reason being is that there's already potential access at Sun Valley. There's warrants met for that. So, we'll appreciate the development team for providing that information and I guess attempting to persuade the DOT otherwise. It must be noted that as we've talked about before, my second comment, all the roads are going to be privately owned and maintained by the club. We would suggest that these be built to a town standard, not only in cross section, but in dimension as well. So we think that the development team's already going to comply with that anyway. And perhaps the only caveat to that is perhaps with the cul-de-sacs, and we'll get into that in a minute. My third comment, the town code chapter 621J specifically talks about not having soft centers or green islands in the cul-de-sacs. Josh and I have had conversations about Sun Valley Trail in particular. Josh's opinion is that that's a loop. It's actually larger in dimension than our required cul-de-sac. And they're doing that for aesthetics, for just making it perhaps a more grand entrance, let's say. I think this is a policy decision that the town should review and perhaps weigh in on as to whether or not they want to allow this a green island, not only in the Sun Valley Trail cul-de-sac, which is going to be a town road, but also within the other loops or cul-de-sacs within the development. So I guess I would say currently our code doesn't speak to loops in the sense that Josh thinks these are loops. I think our interpretation is still that they're cul-de-sacs, but granted they're larger in size. So I guess I would appreciate Plan Commission and board's opinion on that. Josh and I would probably be looking for some direction as to how to proceed with those items. Number 4, we've talked about already. There was some discussion at staff level that the entrance off of Oak Knoll was kind of, I'll say confusing at the time. with respect to whether it was public or private or how that was being handled with respect to gate locations and different things like that. So I think that's been hashed out here. Item 5, as the development proceeds, obviously, we're going to start getting into needing a developer's agreement, letter of credit for the public improvements. Item 6, obviously, we're going to need the real construction plans when the time comes for review. 7 is kind of our typical grading and erosion control and stormwater management have to be submitted to the county and approved prior to land disturbing activity. And then, of course, number 8, we understand that there's been some drainage concerns and problems in the past, both on Sun Valley and to the east off of Mare Hills Drive. And what we're asking is that we somehow address these issues. And when I say address, I don't necessarily mean fix, but to the extent practical that the development can do, we're looking to manage the stormwater on site. And I think Josh and Jack talked about that at great length already. So it seems like that's in the works. So we will want to see more detail as things progress. And I think that's about all I have for my report.
Planner Robarczyk?
Yeah, and I think to summarize, again, tonight we're just here for discussion on the concept. Both Engineer Janelli and I have given some items that we're looking for some direction from both the Town Plan Commission and the board on. Moving forward, I think what we envision for the next steps, and we're also going to be looking for some direction from Plan Commission and board, is that ultimately moving forward, this is going to require a condominium plat. It's going to require condominium documents and restrictive covenants. It's going to require the civil and construction plans. We're going to require landscape and lighting plans, developer agreement with letter of credit, erosion control and stormwater management plans, and then also the conditional use for the plan unit development. And how much of that or all of it in its totality are you going to want to see as a submittal package for their next step? So with that, we'll turn it over to the Plan Commission for discussion.
Yeah, Attorney Macy, please.
Yeah, just a reminder, you were all given notice today. I don't know how many people got a chance to read it, but you will be serving in a quasi judicial capacity in this manner, meaning that you are the judge. You should not have ex parte communication with any of the parties. That would be inappropriate. If you have, you may have to ultimately recuse yourself. You have to make your decision based on the evidence you'll hear at a public hearing. This is not a public hearing. And so those are all just some of the reminders. You cannot prejudge this matter. You have to make your decision based on the information at the public hearing. So any comments that you make tonight have to be in the form of, at the public hearing, when the petitioner makes their presentation, I expect them to deal with this issue or that issue. I think as an example of the way the staff did it, ultimately we'll need a landscaping plan. Ultimately, I think Mr. Janelli said, we're going to need to see this, we're going to need to see that. So it's here tonight for conceptual, for them to present the basics, but for you to say, when you come back, I expect to see this or I expect to see that. If you say something like, I love this plan and I'm going to vote for it, you've just recused yourself and you will not be participating, just so you know that. And if many of the neighbors contacted you and have talked to you, you may have to recuse yourself because you're receiving ex parte. I remind you, you would not want a circuit court judge to take calls from the people on the other side and listen to what they have to say when you're not there to listen if you're the other party on the matter. So remember, this is quasi-judicial, you're the judge, and you have to follow the same rules.
Thank you. I've got a couple of questions. First to Engineer Janelli. I count, depending on how you count them, either 4 or 5 stormwater retention, detention, or infiltration areas. How many exist currently in that area, in that 52 acres?
I think currently there's one. And Josh, you can
No, we're not gonna
Correct.
answer
I'm not.
questions. They're gonna
Okay.
come back and tell us that.
Okay.
If you don't know
I
the
think there's,
answer,
I
they're
think
gonna
there's
come back
one,
and
but
tell
I'm
us.
not sure.
Okay, thank you.
You're gonna wanna know that at the public hearing.
That is something that I will definitely want to know, and where those ponds are getting water from, what areas of the property are they being directed to? Do we know what type of lighting is gonna be? Are we gonna have any street lights or anything? All right, if you could also please address that, what type of lighting is gonna be at the property, on the property? One concern that I have is construction traffic. It can be devastating to roads. And there's really only two places construction traffic can come in. It can come in through Oak Knoll and or Sun Valley. I'd like to find out if those roads are damaged, and we'd like to probably videotape them or something like that prior to construction. Is the petitioner willing to repair those roads after construction if they were to become damaged? Planner Ray Barczyk, a question for you. In the current zoning, if we took these 52 acres and turned them into a subdivision with public roads and so forth, how many lots would be, how many lots could they put on there? In other words, is the 32 lots consistent with our zoning, or is it more, is it less?
And again, I'm sorry to interrupt, Mr. Say to the developer, I expect you to tell me at the public hearing under the zoning, I want to see a conventional plat. I have many communities that do that. They will not approve, or ironically, I think Josh was at several of them where he had to prepare both. He had to prepare a conventional and he prepared this so that you could see what it would look like under a conventional subdivision.
And that's fine. But I do trust our professionals, and I wanted to get.
Well, they'll check it when he submits it, but that's fine. But we can't answer tonight. So if you want him to go out and do that research, he can do it. But I prefer they plat it and he check it. It saves us money.
Fair enough. Well, we're going to back charge him anyway. Those are my first thoughts and first questions. Other questions for the petitioner and or Planner Ray Barczyk, Engineer Janelli? A lot of silence.
Well, you pretty much covered here that I have read. Because my concern is the water runoff issue always on the property. They bring the water. I want to see that.
I don't know that that's entirely accurate. Attorney Macy, could you refresh us on what the rules are with regards to runoff?
Certainly. The law on stormwater runoff is that you cannot redirect the water. If the water leaves the property, the water can leave the property in the same locations and at the same rate. Some communities have a greater restriction than state law, and they say no additional water can leave. I believe our code is not, and I'll defer to our staff. Our code says you can send more water, but it can't leave the property at a greater rate or at a different location. Whenever you build a road, whenever you build a roof, there's less permeable surface, and so there's going to be more water, and they either have to, but they can't change where it left the property, and they can't change at the rate that it left the property. That's what I believe the engineer and the county would look at when they review a stormwater management plan. That's the law.
Okay, thank you. Supervisor Fisher?
Yeah, when this is presented at a public hearing, I'd be interested in some additional information. I see in what you've provided statements such as high standards for construction and landscaping, controlled initially by the owner developer and later by the legend member. Residents of the community, as I understand the proposal, lots would be sold to individuals, and they're doing individual construction as opposed to developments like this that often construction is done by a developer and follows a theme. I mean, I'd be interested in knowing what's in mind in terms of if standards are going to be set, architectural controls for use of materials, that type of thing, I'd be interested in some information on what the vision of that is. Thank you.
Commissioner White?
I have just a couple. The roads, I guess, to make sure they're up to safety standards to our fire commission. Especially the cul-de-sacs, if that would meet their turning radius for safety purposes. The areas that are landscaped areas that are going to be underneath constructions, if they're going to be monitored for some of the trees that we may want to preserve in the areas that they will be doing their home sites at. And obviously I'm in agreement with Janelli, all of his recommendations that we want. I'm definitely interested in the lighting plan that you may give us. That's all I have.
Thank you.
Some centers that Engineer Janelli brought up, I guess my concern is that that's a town code.
Do we think we should be looking on all of their cul-de-sacs or the ones that are public? Okay. Okay.
I think Commissioner Stigler's got a good point. I'm not opposed to the soft centers per se, or at least I think we need, depending on the size and the geometry of those and so forth, but the two that will be on town right away, I think he brings up an awfully good point about the maintenance of the centers of those. I think there needs to be a proposal for that, and I guess saying that I don't think the town wants to get into the business of landscaping and beautifying those soft centers. So I'm not opposed to them in principle, but I think that issue needs to be addressed.
Attorney Macy, could we ask for some sort of performance bond on going into perpetuity to maintain soft centers, or is that just
Well,
going to
what
become complicated?
most of my communities do is they say, you maintain the soft center as part of your homeowners association, or we'll asphalt it over. You know, we're not gonna, they maintain it as part of the homeowners association, and that otherwise we just take it out. And they don't want it out because it's ugly, and they're the only ones who look at it. So we've always had pretty good success by saying, as part of the agreement, you're to maintain this. And I don't know what you mean by, and because they don't want you to just asphalt over it or just turn it into dirt or stone, because it's not very attractive on a gated community entrance. I mean, that's just been our experience, that you as part of the conditions, you say you have to maintain this. And sure, you can add a caveat that if we have to asphalt it over, we're going to special charge you for that cost. Sure.
Okay.
But we don't want to go in the business of landscaping.
Agreed. And could we have a performance bond or something like that for maintenance?
You don't need it because you're not going to do it. If you do anything, you're going to remove everything and asphalt it and special charge them and be done with it.
Fair
I don't want they'd say, go ahead, weed it and send us a bill. You don't want that. You don't want that to be an option, I don't think.
No.
Okay. So yes, we can word it.
Not for us to perform, for them to perform is what I was asking for.
I guess I'd have to see exactly what you mean.
Sure.
What every month that they don't weed it, we get $1,000. I guess I'm trying to vision, it's either you do it or we take it out. And, so you'd have to tell me the scenario of what the performance bond would be if we're not going to do it.
Any other questions, comments, things you want to see addressed at a public hearing? Not for me. Commissioner White?
I just thought of one more. How about the, like, the entryways off the two town roads, what their improvements are going to be when you enter those off the town roads?
I'm not sure I understood that.
I'm just saying if there's any improvements that the town might have to make, or if the developer is going to take care of those arrangements, whatever, for improvements that may occur. I'm assuming-
Now, that one I do think is one that you direct to the planner and the engineer to say, come to the current status of our roads and our DPW, what's it rated at now? What does it need to be rated at? Do you recommend improvements be made to our road? And then I have to give an opinion of whether that's a reasonable condition that they have to make those improvements. I think that's what you're saying. The existing roads, what needs to be done? Do they need to be widened? Do they need to have shoulders put on them? Do they need to have drainage issues addressed? And that's something that our DPW, could look at and make a report back, and they could present that at the public hearing.
That's correct, because the developer's agreement and letter of credit is going to have to address the temporary cul-de-sac on Sun Valley Trail. That'll be the developer's responsibility to restore that once the cul-de-sac is extended onto their property.
Thank you. Well, then I think we've given you some guidance and direction. Anything else? Then I think we can move on to J, site plan of operation for Thomas Shep. Location is South 16 West 22 171 Arcadian Avenue. Tax key is WAKT 129 7966. This is for a recommendation to the town board. Planner Rybarczyk.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The petitioner is requesting a site plan of operation for mini storage on the property. A few months back, we did a rezone of the property from R3 to B3 to allow the petitioner then to come forward with the site plan of operation. The petitioner is proposing to construct two storage buildings. One is 4,800 square feet and the other is 6,300 square feet. The existing home and shed on the property will be raised and removed to allow for the construction of the mini storage. Access to the storage units would come off of Arcadian Avenue. He is proposing a new driveway that centrally aligns with the two buildings, and he has been working with DOT to get that access. The storage units will be available to the occupants by a keypad through electronic gate 7 days a week, but only from 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. So the keypad and the gate won't operate outside of those hours. Maximum number of employees are 2. It's himself and his wife on site. It'll be, call if there's ever an issue that goes on. And then the business is for rental storage, so storage of personal items, boats, trailers, items of that such. When reviewing it, petitioner had actually the property owner had a wetland delineation that is done. The buildings do comply with our 30-foot no-touch area, so the buildings are outside of any of the wetlands. The grading and erosion control plan, Engineer Janelli will speak to that. However, the property owner or the petitioner has been working with Alan Barros and Leif Hoggy from Waukesha County. With regard to the setbacks, the proposed the required setbacks. In looking at the landscape plan for the building foundations, they're required to have 40 points per 100 linear feet of foundation. With regard to the length of the west facade, the east facade, and the north facade of the buildings, the total is 464. This requires a total of 186 points for building foundation plantings. And the proposed foundation plantings total 288 points, so he far exceeds that. With regard to the street frontage, it's 40 points per 100 lineal feet of frontage. It requires 133 points of street frontage. In the landscape plan, they provide 130. However, there is a lot of existing trees that are on Arcadian Avenue as well. And the location of the building is only on half of the lot. So from our standpoint, we thought that the existing vegetation on the east half of the lot should be taken into consideration by the Plan Commission and the board. There is no per se paved parking areas, so they don't have to have landscaping with regard to that. And there is on the remaining part of the land where the wetlands net are at, as you can see in the landscape plan that was provided, there are a lot of mature trees that are going to be preserved. As part of it, that wasn't even taken into consideration in the landscape plan. With regard to the architecture, questions that the Plan Commission and board will have to have is the facades that are facing Arcadian Avenue. They don't meet the 50% finished materials. They fall shy of that. However, again, I think from the standpoint of the petitioner, he's looking for, I guess, some guidance from the Plan Commission based on the landscaping that he's providing. And again, because it is, mini storage, is there some concessions from the 50% rule? The lighting that's being provided on the building is downward facing light, so there's no, we don't have to worry about light pollution from that regard. For engineering comments, I'll turn it over to Engineer Chinelli.
Thanks, Jamie. Yeah, we understand that the applicant is working with Waukesha County to get an erosion control permit. And we understand that they've been talking regarding stormwater, and the stormwater permit is not necessary. I noticed there appears to be an existing well and septic on the property, which are not going to be necessary any longer. So those facilities must be abandoned properly, and I'm requesting that information, the abandonment reports, be provided to the town. Work is happening within Highway 59, so a permit will be necessary for that from Wisconsin DOT. And I didn't see any advertising signage. And if there's going to be like a freestanding monument sign, I'd like to know where that's going to be. Size, type, location should be shown, so we make sure that it's not within a vision triangle of any sort. And I believe that is the last of my report.
And is Mr. Shep here this evening? Good evening.
Just a couple things, in reading the staff review, it lists the previous property owner as the current owner. My wife and I are sole owners of the property as of February of this year, so I assume county record system may not have been caught up yet. Just briefly, this property has been a dumping grounds for years prior. I discovered once the snow melted, I've taken out 2 20-yard dumpsters and countless pickup trucks full of trash, metal, plastics, and wood scattered throughout the property. And I haven't even gotten into the wooded areas yet, but I will. I've been approached and complimented by 3 adjoining neighbors who are very pleased that this property is now being tended to. I've talked with Bruce and Sherry Johnson, that is the next door neighbor to the west, about my plans and showed them my landscape plan. They're very happy that they are not getting multifamily units next to them, as they've had some unpleasant experiences with some of the renters in the small house that's on the property now over the years. Also, in reading staff review, I read about the front of the 30-foot wide building. There's 2 buildings, a 30-foot and a 24-foot. The larger one did not quite meet the 50% glass, brick, or other material required. Now, when you look at the computer-created rendering, that one right there, it does look very tall. However, after I read this, I measured stuff out here, and this is not drawn to scale. I just want to mention, for example, those are 12-foot overhead doors, high, 12-foot high. The building is 30 feet wide. When you measure that out, those doors are drawn right now at 22 feet high. So it's way out of whack. So I did the math on the front of the building, which is a concern. So the actual measurements on the side walls are 13 feet high. The gable peak height is 20 foot 6 inch. So calculating the actual front square footage of that building, it's 502, which would need 251 square feet of some different material. With the 4-foot high brick application and the 2 5-foot wide by 4 feet high windows with 18-inch wide shutters, the number is 184 square feet, which is 66 square feet short. I don't want to make the windows larger because the adjoining building is only at 24 feet. I think it would look funny. I'd like to keep all 4 windows the same size if I could. If you make these larger and have the other one smaller, I'm more concerned with appearance. I don't know if I should say, than the board, but I want to make it look right. If signage on the larger building above the windows would work, I'd be glad to do that. And the sign would be the same beige color background with the burgundy. The colors on here are not very, very vivid, but it's a burgundy roof with burgundy shutters. But I would do the same thing with the sign, just to break that up if that was necessary. The 24-foot building, by the way, has 8-foot high doors and a 14-foot gable peak height, making it 6 foot 6 inch shorter than the 30-foot wide building. Now this, with 276 square feet on the front of the building, or rather this has 276 square feet on the front of the building, total surface area, needing 138 square feet of something different. It is proposed now with 160 square feet, making it 22 square feet over requirement. 2 other things, the well on the property, I would want to retain, if I'm putting $15,000 to $20,000 worth of landscaping into this property, I want to keep it just for watering. There's no sanitary water, there's no sewer, there's no bathroom facilities. It's just for watering. And I talked to the county, they had no problem with that. The other thing, I just received notice today from Alan Barrows at Waukesha County Land Resource that after their review, the grading and erosion plan has been approved. So I'm supposed to go meet with him now, the grader. So is there any question anybody has for me?
Thank you. Planner Rybarczyk, a question for you. Do windows count into the 50% requirement and shutters? Okay. I think we kind of storage and that requirement. We did have, there is another complex going up on some require that of him. And as a matter of fact, I think he's probably 100% of his front face is brick or maybe a Fox brick. Questions for the petitioner and or the planner or engineer?
We got a question for maybe part to Mr. Shep and to Engineer Janelli, but looking at the grading plan, the building to the west there, I think is 210 feet long, north-south. And I mean, look at that towards the south end of both of those buildings. I think that floor elevation of 867.08 is like 9 or 10 feet above grade. I mean, the part of the existing grades on that are natural grades, generally kind of move toward the south or even south, southeast a little bit, they're imperfect, but then the drainage is being pushed to the west from the west side of that property. I mean, any consideration given to stepping the floor elevation of those buildings down along that
Yeah, I would
length?
not, I would not want to do that. I've done these before and the steps are a problem. The step buildings are a problem. Even, I mean, the snow plowing is also an issue, but you have now a slippery slope that somebody can slide down. You have a 2-foot drop from door to door.
Okay, well, I understand that issue, but my concern is you're going to be pushing all the water from the west side of the building to the neighbor to the west.
Everything is going, oh, you're talking on, okay, on the west side.
Yeah, it goes to the property to the west.
And then it's going to go from that point, there'll be a swale and it's all going to go to the rear of the property.
Well, that's not
to
the way the
south.
grading plan shows, doesn't show a swale bringing that around to the front. It shows that on the southwest end of it, pushing it all to that adjoining property. And I understand the issues with stepping it a bit, but I mean, you're going to be on that south end of it there, you're going to be like 10 feet above
Right.
the existing grade in that area.
Yeah, I've, on my landscape plan, I've worked with Alan Barrows on this. So I've been 8 or 9 times with Alan at his office, and I don't know if I'm starting to annoy him or not, but we've walked the property as well. He's walked this, and at the end of the south end, there's going to be, I'm going to call it a dry pond to collect the water there's going to be a swale between the buildings coming down. On the west side, I can address that as well with a swale between the lot line and the end of the slope of the grade and bring that down to that same area.
Yeah, I
That
think-
topsoil stockpile, that's just temporary for the grading plan so that they got a place to put the topsoil. But that's where that would be dug out as a dry pond. And then I've got the fabric and the large stone to come.
I'm just going to tell you, even between the buildings here, you've got the flow line there. You're going a good part of that 210 feet. If you look at the grades, you're dropping a foot. I mean, some of that isn't much more than a 0.5% per foot. That generally wouldn't be considered sufficient to move water through there between the buildings, even if that's paved or whatever.
Yeah, it will be paved.
Yeah, well, most asphalt pavers and stuff are going to be looking at a percent, which would be more like 1.100 feet, and you're more like about 1.2 feet. I mean, some might pinch down to 0.75%, but you're probably not going to be able to move water through there without having some of the areas puddle up and pond and that type of thing. There's a lot of communities that won't even let you pave at that flat of a rate. You're not going to get a paver that's going to be able to do it that way.
Well, it's got to move the water, so that would have to be corrected. I mean, I'm not an engineer, but, you know, I trusted these people to do this, and I actually, Jamie knows about this, a local, I'm not going to name names, but a local engineer who got a lot of money for this. That I'm glad you pointed that out. It will be looked at.
Other questions? Just out of curiosity, how many storage units are you anticipating?
30,
All with full-size garage doors?
yes.
Okay.
It's not a very large facility. It's not what I intended when I purchased the property, but I understand that, you know, the water situation is kind of the most important part with that parcel. It's 4.6 acres and this is less than a half acre being developed. So it is what it is.
So the issue before us is are we going to force the 50% rule on the front of the buildings? And if so, is there a motion to that effect? Do you have more? Well, I think that can be addressed with staff and approved by staff. Or do you want the petitioner to come back with a different grading plan?
Well, I think this kind of lends itself to the same thing we talked about a month or two ago, where the plan is one thing and what we're asking for is another. And there we sit. Is that right, Brian?
With regard to which issue?
Grading, because I don't think it works.
Okay, well, I don't think it works very well either. I mean, I guess I'd be amenable to let staff deal with it, but I think there are some significant issues with the grading.
So are you saying you would prefer to let staff deal with it? And before or after we take
I guess
action?
maybe flip it back, let staff speak to that, and maybe staff doesn't agree or whatever, but I mean, weigh in, give us your thoughts about that. And I understand the county is looking at some of that, but I mean, I know there are concerns with drainage in that area and so forth. So I guess, Chris, any thoughts about that? Maybe you don't agree.
I don't disagree. How about that? Normally when I review a grading plan like this, the water is going downhill. I'll grant you 0.5% on pavement. It's not ideal, but in roads, we do that a lot when we're kind of seesawing from flat areas. But oftentimes that comes with curb and gutter that is going to be better than asphalt. So I could see a little better pitch on the asphalt. With respect to the I'll call it ditch or lack of the ditch on the west side, I think it's pretty well defined up until maybe the G in building. And then after that, it kind of seems to peter out. But I think in general, it's coming due south and not going west. But maybe some better definition to the swale would be, helpful. And I can certainly, work with the engineer, the applicant to make it rosier.
So then the question back to Commissioner Miller, do you want to see that on paper or before you take any action?
Well, I don't want to see the guys spend money foolishly, so I guess we can certainly trust our engineer.
Okay. Supervisor Fisher? All right. Then the last question before us is the face of the buildings. Having 50% finished material.
Well, that's our requirement now, isn't it?
That is our requirement, and he's asking for a waiver of that. And I think we kind of set the standard with the mini storage jets on Sunset.
Well, I agree. I think we should make them live up to our requirement.
All right. And are we going to ask him to bring that back with that, or do you want to allow the planner to make that decision?
They can make a decision like that.
Okay. All right. Somebody want to put that into a form of a motion? Subject to the planners and the engineers' recommendations, review and approval for the grading, as well as the materials used on the face of the building at 50%. And is there a second?
Sure.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. And the moment we've all been waiting for, a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
All in favor? Aye. We are adjourned. We'll have about a 5 or 10 minute break.